A Jedi, a symbol of hope, justice, and balance in the galaxy. But in the age of the Empire, a Jedi is something else entirely. A fugitive, a survivor, a shadow hiding from the light they once carried. Bracca, a starship graveyard, and a fitting metaphor for a galaxy in transition. This Grappa's world is a place where the echoes of the Republic and Separatist conflict, the Clone Wars, are dismantled and repurposed for the Empire's endless hunger for power. It's a place of decay, where the relics of a once proud galaxy are stripped down to feed its oppressors. On one level, it's just scrappers doing their job, but on a deeper level, it's a symbol of how the Empire consolidates power by dismantling what came before and using it to feed their war machine. And this isn't just a Star Wars thing. It mirrors what real-world empires have done throughout history. Take the Romans, for example. They conquered the Greeks, adopted their art, architecture, and philosophy, and then used it to fuel their own dominance. Or look at the British Empire, which pulled raw materials and wealth from colonized lands to expand their reach, leaving those territories stripped of their industries and independence. Just like how Bracca's workers are stripping down the galaxy's past to support this new empire. And then there's the destruction of history itself. The Empire doesn't just want power, they want to erase the Republic and the Jedi, wipe out their legacy entirely. That's something real-world conquerors have done too, like the Mongols destroying cities or Spanish conquistadors burning Aztec codices. Bracca's graveyard of Republic-era tech is basically the Empire saying the past doesn't matter anymore, only we do.
Past time, if you have to.
But history teaches us something else too. Empires don't last forever.
Time it is for you to look at a pile of old books.
History shows us that the systems built on destruction eventually fall apart. The Roman Empire, gone. The British Empire, disbanded. Even in Star Wars, the Empire itself becomes a pile of wreckage after its fall, scavenged on planets like Jakku, just like they once scavenged the Republic. There will be times when the struggle seems impossible. I know this already. Alone, unsure, dwarfed by the scale of the enemy. Remember this. Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction. And then remember this. The Imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks. It leaks. Authority is brittle. Oppression is the mask of fear. Remember that. And know this. The day will come when all these skirmishes and battles, these moments of defiance will have flooded the banks of the Empire's authority, and then there will be one too many. One single thing will break the siege. Remember this. Try. Bracca shows this cycle in action. The old gets consumed to build the new, and eventually the new will crumble too. But let's get back to the here and now. And it's here, among the wreckage of galactic history, that we meet Cal Kestis, a Jedi in hiding, eking out an existence as one of the very workers tearing his own past apart. Bracca is more than just a backdrop. It's a narrative statement. The wreckage here is unmistakably drawn from the prequel era, a visual shorthand that ties us to the galactic conflict orchestrated by Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord who would become Emperor. The Lucahulk, so iconic to the Separatists. Newt Gunray's blockade flagship from the Phantom Menace, now lies hollow and forgotten, its imposing ring shape cleaved apart. Republic Star Destroyers, Venators, once the flagships of the Jedi and beacons of strength and order, are being reduced to scrap metal, chopped up for parts to feed the Imperial war machine. And the Jedi starfighters, like this one, an ETA-2, Arctic-class interceptor, last seen piloted by Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, on their way to rescue the Chancellor at the start of Episode 3. Once symbols of hope and the guardians of peace are now left to rot, their pilots long dead or hunted to extinction. And then there's Cal Kestis himself, a relic, a Jedi survivor of Order 66, hidden in plain sight. A young man carrying the weight of a shattered past, reduced to scavenging the pieces of a world he once believed in. The galaxy has moved on without him. Its focus shifted from the ideals of the Republic to the tyranny of the Empire. And Cal, like Bracca itself, is caught in that liminal space between eras. Between the bright, hopeful iconography of the prequels and the grim, utilitarian machinery of the original trilogy. Symbolically, Bracca serves as a bridge between the two trilogies in Star Wars. The old world is being dismantled, its ideals, its heroes, its conflicts, all pulled apart to fuel this Empire's war machine. And Cal, once a Jedi, is now a cog in that machine. His light dimmed, his hope all but extinguished. Like the ships he disassembles, he is a relic of the past, seemingly with no place in this galaxy's future. The design of Bracca reinforces this theme immediately. The landscape is treacherous, filled with jagged edges, precarious platforms and bottomless pits. It's as if the galaxy itself is unstable, breaking apart under the weight of its own history. For Cal, every step is a reminder of the fragility of his existence, a precarious balancing act between survival and discovery. But Bracca isn't just a symbol of decay. It's also a crucible. It's here in this desolate scrapyard that Cal's past comes crashing back into his present. When he saves a friend using the Force, he reveals himself to the Empire, setting off a chain of events that will pull him from hiding and force him to confront the very history he's tried so hard to bury. Bracca is more than just the setting for the start of Cal's story. It's a mirror. A reflection of a galaxy at a crossroads, and of a young Jedi struggling to find his place in it. It's a world of wreckage and potential, decay and rebirth. And as Cal takes his first uncertain steps towards reclaiming his own identity, the scrapyard becomes the stage for a story that bridges eras, not just in this galaxy, but in the legacy of Star Wars itself. Cal's journey begins in silence. He's buried the Force deep within himself, along with his identity as a Jedi. The trauma of Order 66, of watching his master, Jara Tapal, die to save him, has left scars too deep to heal. And so, Cal hides. Not just from the Empire, but from himself. This is what makes Fallen Order's introduction so effective for me. Bracca isn't just a physical space. It's that reflection of Cal's mental state. He's lost, trapped in a cycle of routine and survival. Even the platforming in these early moments feels hesitant. The controls feel limiting, and of course they are, as if Cal is rediscovering his own instincts, one step at a time. We know that Cal can't stay hidden forever. When his friend Prof is endangered, instinct takes over. For a moment, Cal is a Jedi again, grasping the Force to save a life. And with that single act, the Empire descends. Bracca, of course, serves as the graveyard for the galaxy's past. But it's also the stage where Cal Kestis' dormant Jedi instincts are violently reawakened. It is here that the Inquisitors, the Empire's hunters of Jedi survivors, reveal themselves, shattering whatever fragile peace Cal has managed to build in the wake of the trauma of Order 66. The introduction of the Inquisitors is not only a pivotal narrative moment, but also a grim showcase of the Empire's cruelty. The Inquisitors are the embodiment of the Empire's mastery of fear and control, but the two we're introduced to here represent a different facet of the dark side each. The Ninth Sister, Masana Tide, is raw fury given form. As a Dawutan, she towers over her victims, wielding her massive frame and brute strength as weapons of terror. She is all brute force, rage and physical domination, anger, unrestrained and unchecked. Opposite her stands the second sister, Trilla Suduri, a far more sinister presence. Her words are sharp, her every movement deliberate. Her calculated cruelty makes her a terrifyingly efficient predator. She takes pleasure in taunting her prey, wielding her intellect and cunning as weapons just as deadly as her saber. Trilla's every word cuts as deeply as any blade, her tone laced with disdain and dark amusement. When she confronts Cal for the first time, she coolly taunts him, dissecting him with her words before a single blow is exchanged. When the workers of Bracca are rounded up, the second sister wastes no time asserting her authority. It is not enough to merely hunt the Jedi. The Inquisitors exist to project fear and extinguish hope. In this moment, Prof, Cal's friend and mentor figure, steps forward as a voice of defiance. His words carry the bitter truth of life under the Empire.
Then came the Empire. The workers? They just started getting worked.
Prof.
We all know the truth.
His courage is undeniable, but it's also fatal. Without hesitation, the second sister ignites her blade, cutting him down mid-sentence. Prof's death is a chilling demonstration of the Empire's philosophy, where life has value only insofar as it serves their machine. For Cal, it is a moment of both horror and revelation. Years of suppressing his Jedi identity fall away as he instinctively ignites his saber, drawn into the open and exposed as the very thing the Inquisitors seek. What follows is a thrilling and desperate escape. A chase that perfectly captures Cal's vulnerability at this stage of his adventure. The magnetized train sequence, a high-octane gauntlet of stormtroopers, scout troopers with electro batons, and even Imperial gunships, isn't just an adrenaline rush, though it certainly is that too. It's a visceral reminder that Cal is no longer in control of his life. He's being hunted, and survival is his only goal. With a deafening roar, the TIE Reaper's blaster bolts tear through the train tracks ahead. The mag train lurches violently, its front cars crumpling and plunging into the abyss below. Cal Kestis barely grabs a hold of himself as his car tips forward, the screech of grinding metal piercing the air. One by one, the train cars collapse, falling like a line of doomed dominoes. The floor tilts sharply beneath him, and Cal slides uncontrollably, dodging debris as it rains down around him. The howl of rushing wind and the groan of tearing metal fills his ears. A section of the train snaps free and plummets into the sprawling junkscape below, leaving Cal hurtling faster and faster toward the collapsing front cars. Through the chaos, Cal spots the Stinger Mantis hovering unsteadily nearby, its boarding ramp extended, a precarious lifeline amidst the destruction. Summoning every ounce of strength, Cal leaps desperately from the train's edge, reaching the ramp just in time. His fingers grip the edge, a momentary taste of salvation. until another volley from the TIE Reaper shatters his hold. Cal plummets downward, his body tumbling helplessly through the air. A passing, floating droid breaks his fall with a jarring jolt. Clinging to it for dear life, Cal rides the droid to a lower platform, finally landing hard in a deserted loading bay. The impact knocks the wind from his lungs and he staggers to his feet, gasping for air. Before he can fully recover, a chilling presence descends. Trilla Suduri, the second sister, emerges from the shadows, her black armor gleaming ominously. She drops gracefully from her TIE interceptor, the Force cushioning her landing as if she floats on air. The confrontation that follows is pretty one-sided. The second sister isn't just a superior duelist. She's that predator, toying with her prey. For Cal, this fight is a harsh lesson in just how far he's fallen from the disciplined and promising young Jedi Padawan he once was. This isn't the Cal Kestis we'll know by the end of his journey. At the start of Fallen Order, he's out of practice, both physically and emotionally. Combat feels raw, uncertain, as Cal relearned the skills he's tried so hard to suppress. Even the Force, that defining trait of the Jedi, feels tenuous in his hands, like a muscle atrophied by years of neglect. Every strike he lands is countered effortlessly, every defensive maneuver overwhelmed by the sister's precision and speed. Salvation comes not from Cal's skill, but from the intervention of the Stinger Mantis, piloted by Greez, a gruff and pragmatic Latero, and Cere Junda, a mysterious figure armed with only a blaster. The Mantis becomes Cal's lifeline. They're the first glimmer of hope in Cal's story, the possibility of finding purpose again. But hope isn't something Cal can trust. Not yet. Trauma has made him wary, closed off and doubtful of his own worth as a Jedi. But even in retreat, the second sister refuses to relinquish her prey. Blocking blaster fire with ease, she approaches the Mantis' open passenger door with menacing speed. The door closes just in time to save Cere from the searing, angry red blade aimed for her head. The burning impression left in the door a reminder of how close the sister was from finding her revenge. She leaps onto the ship's exterior, clinging with terrifying tenacity. Using the Force, she wrenches at the controls, threatening to pull the ship from the sky. This reckless desperation is more than just a show of power, of course. It hints at something deeply personal, a hatred that burns beyond the mission of the Inquisitorius. This final desperate act foreshadows the deeply personal nature of the second sister's vendetta. For her, it's not just about hunting Jedi, it's about revenge. Her reckless use of the Force to bring down the Mantis reveals a glimpse of the hatred burning within her, a hatred tied to Cere, her former master, and the source of her deepest wounds. The Mantis narrowly escapes this first encounter. The crew shaken, but alive. For Cal, the events on Bracca are an irrevocable turning point, the crossing of a Rubicon. The Inquisitors are more than hunters, they are harbingers of a galaxy steeped in fear and oppression. The Empire's cruelty has extinguished lives, destroyed his hiding place, and left him with no choice but to confront his past. Bracca, the Scrapper's world, is left behind forever. But its lessons linger. The galaxy is unforgiving, its dangers immense. Cal's journey is no longer about survival, it's about rediscovery. With the promise of sanctuary on the quiet, lush world of Bogano ahead, he must begin to reclaim the identity he buried and find a way to stand against the darkness that now pursues him. Trilla Suduri, the second sister, serves as one of the most compelling figures in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. not just as an antagonist but as a dark reflection of Cal Kestis himself. Through their repeated clashes, her tragic history unfolds, presenting an intimate, cautionary tale about the corrosive power of hatred, guilt, and surrender to the dark side. In her, Cal confronts what he could become, should he falter in his path of healing and redemption. One of their most pivotal encounters occurs on Zepho, amidst the ancient ruins of the tomb of Trilla. Cal ventures here to uncover lost Jedi knowledge, but the Empire's shadow looms large. The dig site, adorned with Imperial banners and machinery, symbolizes the Empire's relentless dismantling of history, erasing identities and repurposing the past for its domination. Trilla lies in wait, a predator confident in her prey's inevitable arrival. Their duel is as much a battle of words as it is of lightsabers at this stage. Trilla, ever the manipulator, mocks Cal's mission and his abilities. She wields her knowledge of him like a weapon, recounting details of his master Jara Tapal and Cere Junda, Cal's new mentor. Her taunts are pointed, calculated to shake his resolve. When she overpowers him, slamming him against a gate bearing an Imperial's insignia, it becomes clear how much ground Cal still has to cover. To this point, Cal and the player may have been given confidence in their abilities, tearing through stormtroopers, scouts, maybe even a few purge troopers. But Trilla is a different prospect entirely. The gap in their abilities is not only physical, but psychological. Trilla's presence is an embodiment of the Empire's might and her personal mastery over the dark side. Only the intervention of BD-1, Cal's ever-loyal droid, saves him, activating a ray shield that separates them just as Trilla's blade descends. This brief reprieve does not stop her verbal sparring, of course. She removes her helmet, revealing her face for the first time, a face marked not only by anger, but by suffering too. Their identity as Cere's former Padawan is laid bare in this moment. This revelation cuts Cal deeper than any strike, planting seeds of doubt in his mind. Already struggling to open up and trust, Cal is shaken. Trilla insinuates that Cere, haunted by her own failures, could betray him, just as she did her. It is a moment of vulnerability for Cal, who is already grappling with his traumatic past. Yet Trilla's torment is also made clear here. She speaks of her capture, the torturous process of being broken and reshaped into an Inquisitor, her hatred for Cere, her former master who surrendered her to the Empire in a desperate gambit, simmers beneath her words. There is no forgiveness, only a seething resentment that fuels her power.
What would he think if he could see his Padawan now, skulking in the shadows with a betrayer, granting her access to a legion of impressionable students?
No, I won't let anyone touch them.
I thought the same thing once.
Their confrontation near the climax of Fallen Order on Bogano unravels Trilla's arc a little more, deepening the parallel lines between Trilla and Cal. At the temple where our journey truly began, Cal retrieves the holocron, a device containing the names of known Force-sensitive children across the galaxy. As he reaches for it, a harrowing Force vision pulls him into a nightmare of his own worst fears. In this vision, Cal sees himself training younglings, only for them to fall into the Empire's clutches. He sees himself captured, tortured, and ultimately transformed into an Inquisitor, much like Trilla. This horrifying possibility, the notion that even the noblest intentions can lead to darkness, shakes him to his core. The second sister arrives soon after, and the vision's themes bleed into reality. Their short duel is as much about the holocron as it is a battle of ideologies. Trilla's taunts once again target Cal's insecurities. But this time, with the player's late-game skills and the confidence of having already overcome the Ninth Sister, Cal holds his own, even disarming the Inquisitor. When he seizes her lightsaber, the weapon itself becomes a window into her past, thanks to Cal's semi-unique force ability, psychometry, flooding Cal with memories of her betrayal and suffering. It is a pivotal moment for both characters. For Cal, it is a painful first-hand glimpse into the kind of darkness that consumed Trilla, and a reminder of what he must resist. For Trilla, it's a moment of true vulnerability. The first time we've shown that Cal has everything he needs to defeat her. She flees, holocron in hand, retreating to the Empire's fortress Inquisitorius. Cal, and the player, has one final journey, this time into the heart of darkness, to save the future Force-sensitive children across the galaxy, and, perhaps, Trilla's fractured soul. The Fortress Inquisitorius, rising ominously from the stormy seas of the moon of Nur in the Mustafar system, looms like a dark, gothic shadow. Beneath the waves, Cal infiltrates the submerged stronghold's labyrinthine halls, picking off groups of elite troopers as he makes his way through the prison block, towards the central interrogation chamber, and toward the stolen Jedi holocron. Toward Trilla Suduri. The final encounter between Cal and Trilla takes place in the Empire's stronghold, a chillingly sterile and oppressive environment that mirrors the psychological grip the Empire holds over its victims. Their duel is fierce, but is also tinged with desperation. Cal fights not just for himself, but to retrieve the holocron. Only one last duel remains. This is the culmination of Cal's Jedi journey up to this point. His connection with the Force, now healed, and his skills with the lightsaber are sharp, at least in the narrative. A player with as little skill as I have might need a few attempts to defeat the second sister. Lethal cuts and thrusts, unblockable grabs and powerful slams, this is Trilla no longer holding anything back. All previous encounters were simply warm-ups to this, unlocking more of her moves steadily as she gains a respect for Cal's growing power. Cal does attempt a mid-fight talk, empathizing with her pain, the pain he felt through the Force at the mere touch of her saber hilt. But it falls on deaf ears. Desperation and hatred are powerful allies. When Cal disarms her, it feels less like a victory and more like a tragedy. As she kneels, truly vulnerable, Cere enters, offering an apology and a final chance at reconciliation. For a moment, it seems that Trilla might take it. Her hatred falters. Her expression softens.
It's over, Trilla. Nothing is ever truly over.
This fight is over. I know the darkness that is eating you up inside, and every day we choose to either feed it or fight it.
It's too late, Cere.
No, it's not. I know the choices that I made took all your choices away, and I have failed you, Trilla. I failed you. And I am so very sorry.
I've carried so much hate for you.
But any hope for redemption is cut short by the arrival of a familiar, mechanical rasp. Darth Vader's arrival is a stark and visceral reminder of what the galaxy faces. a walking embodiment of fear, pain, and absolute control. As the heavy, mechanical cadence of his breathing fills the room, the air thickens with an oppressive darkness. This is no ordinary Jedi hunting machine. This is Anakin Skywalker at his most raw, young, enraged, and seething with the unresolved pain of the licking flames of Mustafar and Obi-Wan Kenobi's victory. His presence is suffocating, his movements precise and purposeful, his power unchecked. Vader descends into the chamber like a shadow over the sun. His voice is cold, unfeeling, a void. Suspended by an effortless motion of Vader's hand, Trilla cannot move, her defiance drowned in the overwhelming tide of his will. Yet even as the grip of death tightens, she finds the strength to cry out. Mercy is of course a foreign concept to Vader. In a single swift motion, his crimson blade cuts through her, extinguishing her life and her pain. Her body crumples to the floor as Vader turns his helmeted gaze to the two Jedi who dare remain standing. Rage races within Cere like a wildfire as she watches her former Padawan fall, a fresh wound atop years of grief and guilt. With a primal scream, she leaps at Vader, her blade flashing with righteous fury. Vader does not flinch. With a casual flick of his wrist, he hurls her away with the Force, her body careening down a ventilation shaft, leaving only the young Jedi before him. Cal's hands tighten around his saber, his stance a testament to his courage even in the face of the impossible. The Dark Lord looms over him, all menace and certainty. Vader's words drip with condescension, as though speaking to a child playing with a toy they cannot hope to wield. Cal's bravery falters in the face of this black shadow, this reaper, but his resolve holds. He's quick to quip, masking his fear behind a thin veneer of humor. He raises his blade in the guard taught to him by Jara Tapal, but the outcome is already written. Vader will move with terrifying speed, the sheer force of his attack shattering Cal's guard and his spirit. In moments, the young Jedi is disarmed, overwhelmed by the unrelenting tide of power from the Chosen One. But Cal is resourceful, if nothing else. In a desperate bid, he uses the Force to hurl a nearby container at Vader. It's not meant to harm, but to distract, and it works, if only for a moment. That moment is enough for Cal to flee, but his retreat is far from assured. Vader's rage boils over and the environment bends to his will. Metal rips from the walls, girders twist and snap, and hunks of steel fly through the air, chasing the fleeing Padawan. Each step is a test of survival, the very fortress itself becoming a weapon in Vader's hands. Trilla's story is a cautionary tale, her arc a dark reflection of Cal's. Both endured the trauma of Order 66, but their paths diverged at a critical juncture. Jara Tapal's selfless sacrifice gave Cal a foundation of hope, a belief in the possibility of good, even amidst despair. Trilla, in contrast, was betrayed by Cere, the one person she trusted most. This betrayal fractured her, leaving her vulnerable to the Empire's cruelty and the allure of the dark side. Where Cal's journey is one of rediscovery and healing, Trilla's is one of degradation and consumption. Her inability to forgive, to let go of her hatred, seals her fate. She stands as a warning to Cal, a vision of what could happen should he succumb to his anger or guilt at the passing of his own master. Her death at Vader's hands is a chilling reminder of the dark side's true nature. It does not grant power, it enslaves. In her final moments, Trilla's hatred gives way to a frightened plea for vengeance, not for herself perhaps, but for all those who have suffered under the Empire. It is a flicker of the Jedi she once was, extinguished before any hope of redemption. Trilla's fall to the dark side, born from that same trauma Cal endured, is a warning. This is what happens when pain is left unchecked, when the walls we build to protect ourselves become prisons. In Trilla, Fallen Order weaves a powerful narrative of loss and redemption, framing Cal's journey not just as one of reclaiming his Jedi heritage, but of resisting the seductive pull of hatred and fear. Where Trilla falls, Cal must rise. Where she succumbs, he must endure. It's only through pain and confrontation with his past that Cal begins to grow. On Dathomir, in a vision within an ancient temple, the tomb of Kujet, the Zephonian seat of power for Zepho sage Kujet, Cal and the player is forced to relive his master's sacrifice during Order 66. It's here that Fallen Order reveals its core theme. Trauma doesn't just disappear, it lingers, it festers, and it must be faced head-on. Order 66 was the ultimate contingency plan orchestrated by Emperor Palpatine, then still acting as Chancellor of the Republic. Issued during the final days of the Clone Wars, it was a single command that turned the galaxy's clone army against their Jedi generals. Built into the genetic programming of every clone soldier was an inhibitor chip, designed to suppress their autonomy and override any sense of loyalty or self-determination. Upon receiving the order, clones carried out Palpatine's will without question, to hunt down and execute every Jedi they encountered. In an instant, former allies became executioners. Jedi who had led these soldiers into battle, formed bonds of trust, and fought alongside the clones were betrayed and slaughtered. For the Jedi Order, it was a cataclysmic event. The near total annihilation of its members and its legacy, orchestrated with terrifying precision. While a few Jedi managed to escape, the majority were caught off guard and overwhelmed. The Purge marked the end of the Republic, the fall of the Jedi, and the birth of the Empire. For Cal Kestis, Order 66 was the most defining and deeply traumatic moment of his life to that point. As a young Jedi Padawan, Cal experienced his betrayal firsthand during his training aboard a Republic ship. In an instant, everything he had known, his master, his fellow Jedi, and the safety of the Order was ripped away. Watching his trusted mentor, Jara Tapal, sacrifice himself to ensure Cal's survival left scars that would follow him for years. The trauma of Order 66 shaped who Cal would become. Forced to go into hiding, he severed his connection to the Force as a means of self-preservation, burying his identity as a Jedi under layers of guilt and grief and fear. The betrayal instilled a deep sense of distrust toward the Empire, of course, but also toward the galaxy at large. It was a galaxy that had turned on him, one that no longer felt safe. This event sits at the heart of Jedi Fallen Order. As the player, you are forced to relive Cal's trauma firsthand, living through it as though it was your own, witnessing the confusion and pain in a visceral way. Cal's journey isn't just about surviving the Empire, it's about surviving the weight of his past. Every Force power he relearns, every battle he fights, and every choice he makes throughout the game is a step toward reconciling the trauma of that day. He's not just fighting the Empire, he's fighting to heal his identity as a Jedi, in a galaxy where the Order has been erased. But healing doesn't happen in isolation. The crew of the Mantis, and especially BD-1, become Cal's lifeline. Together they embody that theme of found family, a staple of Star Wars storytelling. Through them, Cal starts to see that he isn't alone in his struggle, that survival isn't just about enduring, but about finding meaning again. The crew of the Mantis isn't just a collection of quirky personalities orbiting Cal Kestis, they are integral to his journey of healing. Each member offers a different perspective on that trauma, resilience, and connection, helping Cal and the player understand what it means to move forward in the wake of great loss. Their bonds are forged through shared experiences, and over the course of Fallen Order, these relationships evolve into a found family that becomes just as important as the larger mission.
Thank you, Greez.
Well, if it's all the same to you, I was thinking that maybe I would stick around here and take you wherever you gotta go. Besides, the kid kinda looks up to me.
Cere is, perhaps, the most complex figure in Cal's orbit. A former Jedi Knight burdened by immense guilt and the scars of her own failures.
I'm responsible for the path that Trilla is on. And what she does next is the cost of all of my mistakes.
Our mistakes are in the past. And it's all of our responsibility, and it's about what we do next that's important. You taught me that, Cere.
You're right.
From the beginning, her role as a mentor is tinged with hesitance. She has cut herself off from the Force, haunted by her surrender of Trilla to the Empire, and the atrocities that followed that decision. For Cal, Cere is first a stranger, unworthy of trust. Her struggles with guilt and anger, which leave her dangerously close to the pull of the dark side, make her seem fragile and flawed in ways that challenge the archetype of a wise and steady mentor. Yet her pain and regret resonate deeply with Cal. Her survivor's guilt very much mirrors his own, though their roles are twisted reflections of each other. Where Cal's master Jara Tapal gave his life to save his Padawan, Cere chose her own survival over Trilla's, a decision that has left her soul scarred and her rage perpetually close to the surface. In cutting herself off from the Force, Cere has attempted to dam the darkness threatening to consume her, but at the cost of her connection to the identity she once held so closely as a Jedi. Yet Cere is not defined solely by her failures. She becomes the living testament to the difficult but essential journey of healing. She doesn't offer Cal easy answers or pretend her pain has been neatly resolved. Instead, she models the courage to face her past and the resilience to own her mistakes, no matter how devastating. In doing so, she teaches Cal that one's scars are not a source of shame, but a foundation for growth. Cere's arc reaches a poignant turning point late in the story, where she chooses to reclaim her connection to the Force and wield Trilla's lightsaber, a weapon heavy with personal history, as a symbol of her commitment to atonement. This moment is not just an act of defiance against the Empire, but an embodiment of the very lesson she has sought to impart to Cal, embracing failure and moving forward with forgiveness. Her choice to live by the advice she has given Cal lends her words weight and inspires him to step into his own role as a Jedi Knight, even as he wrestles with lingering doubts about his readiness. Cere's journey and her willingness to face her past head-on demonstrate to Cal that strength isn't about perfection, it's about perseverance.
So are you.
Greez, the cranky but endearing Latero pilot of the Mantis, may seem like comic relief on the surface. but he provides Cal with a sense of stability and warmth that proves essential. Unlike Cere, Greez has no connection to the Jedi Order or the Force. What he brings to the table is a grounded perspective. His humor and pragmatism balancing the high-stakes drama of the mission at large. And, of course, his four steady hands at the controls of the Mantis. While Greez might grumble about the dangers they face, his loyalty to the crew is unwavering. He's quick to comfort Cal in his quieter moments of doubt, often in his own gruff, roundabout way. Greez doesn't have to share Cal's specific trauma to empathize with it. Instead, he offers something equally vital, a safe space where Cal can relax, joke, and feel like a person instead of a fugitive Jedi. This type of bond is likely one that Cal hasn't experienced before, beyond his short-lived friendship with Prof. As while Jarrah Tapal was a person of security to Cal, it's unclear if he was ever gentle and familial like Greez is. It's certainly not the vibe I get from him, in any case. Of course, his brush with bounty hunters and gambling nearly proved deadly, in an unfortunate misfire of an attempt to inject peril into the story, where I don't think it's particularly needed. The level that takes place on the asteroid, the Ordo Eris, is not particularly long, but it does slow the pace of the story to a crawl, just as we're ramping up towards the middle section of the game. And the distress of losing BD-1, however temporary, coupled with an unengaging gauntlet of most of the creature-type enemies thrown together at random, mean I end up dreading this particular section of the game on repeat playthroughs. But ultimately, through Greez, Fallen Order shows the power of ordinary acts of kindness in the face of extraordinary hardship. Whether it's a meal prepared in the Mantis galley, or a light-hearted quip to break the tension, Greez reminds Cal, and the player of course, that even in the darkest times, moments of comfort and companionship matter. Merrin, the Night Sister of Dathomir, doesn't join the Mantis Crew until quite late in the story, but her impact on Cal's journey is profound nonetheless. Like him, she is a survivor of unimaginable loss, the sole remnant of her people after General Grievous and the Separatists decimated the Night Sisters during the Clone Wars. Merrin begins the story as a character consumed by her desire for retribution against those she believes destroyed her family and culture. As one of the last surviving Night Sisters, she carries the weight of unimaginable loss. Her world was shattered during that battle on Dathomir, her clan decimated. In the aftermath, Merrin was left to bury her fallen sisters and grapple with the loneliness of being one of the few remnants of her kind. Her initial hostility toward Cal stems from her own trauma and mistrust of Jedi, whom she holds responsible for her people's fate. I suppose seeing a four-armed monstrosity wielding lightsabers extinguish everyone you've ever known will leave you uninterested in the distinction between the separate tribes of lightsaber wielders. To Merrin, the lightsaber is the weapon of the enemy, which makes Cal a threat she hasn't encountered in quite some time. Her path, however, is further complicated by manipulation. Taron Malicos, a fallen Jedi corrupted by the dark side, deceives her into believing the Jedi were responsible for her clan's annihilation. Driven by anger and sorrow, she allies with Malicos, reluctantly, teaching him Night Sister magic in exchange for his promise of vengeance. But as Merrin delves deeper into this partnership, she begins to question the morality and truth of her decisions, especially as Malicos' true nature reveals itself. Her mistrust and anger are easy to empathize with, even as she sends a horde of zombified Night Sisters hurtling after you. When Cal arrives on Dathomir, he is immediately positioned as a potential adversary in Merrin's eyes, just another Jedi who might perpetuate the harm done to her people. Yet, as the story unfolds, Cal demonstrates a compassion and understanding that forces Merrin to reconsider her assumptions. In their interactions, Cal's sincerity breaks through her guarded exterior, and he shows her that vengeance is not the path to healing. His own experiences, fleeing the Empire, losing his master, and learning to reconnect with the Force, resonate deeply with Merrin, helping her see beyond her grief and her anger. He provides her with hope of a better future, just as Cere, Greez, and BD-1 have done to him throughout the earlier course of the game. Cal is in a much better emotional position than he was at the beginning of the game, having learned much to be able to pass on his teachings in this way to another. Their eventual alliance is built on that mutual understanding. When Cal listens to Merrin's pain without dismissing it, she begins to see him not as an enemy, but as someone who shares her burden of survivor's guilt. In turn, Merrin challenges Cal to expand his worldview. Her Night Sister magic and unconventional perspective on the Force offer him new ways of thinking about his own connection to it, something that gets expanded on mechanically in Survivor. Merrin's decision to help Cal confront Malicos becomes a pivotal moment in her arc. In rejecting Malicos's corruption and aiding Cal in their shared fight, she symbolically casts off the chains of her vengeful fixation. Her eventual choice to join Cal's crew on the Stinger Mantis is a testament to her growth and her willingness to embrace a new perspective. She no longer sees herself as merely a survivor of her clan, but as someone who can forge a new path and find a place in a galaxy that once seemed only threatening. Merrin's late addition to the crew underscores the importance of diversity in healing. While Cal's bond with Cere is rooted in shared Jedi experiences, and his bond with Greez is grounded in camaraderie, Merrin offers something different, a bridge to a broader understanding of the galaxy, great responsibility, and himself. Their growing friendship shows that even those who seem fundamentally different can find common ground in their pain and ultimately their hope for the future. Droids in Star Wars have always held a unique place in the galaxy. Far beyond their mechanical designs and program functions, they're emblematic of some of the franchise's most enduring themes: hope in the face of despair, resilience against overwhelming odds, and the unyielding power of loyalty. From the steadfast courage of R2-D2 and the anxious pragmatism of C-3PO to the rebellious heroism of K-2SO, droids have consistently played a crucial role in shaping the emotional resonance of Star Wars. BD-1, the diminutive yet resourceful companion to Cal Kestis, carries on this legacy while forging a unique bond with both the player and the narrative. In a galaxy rife with darkness and oppression, droids often represent a beacon of optimism and unflagging determination. Unlike many of the sentient beings populating the Star Wars universe, droids are not burdened by fear or doubt, allowing them to act with unwavering resolve even in the direst of circumstances. BD-1 exemplifies this spirit. His bright demeanor and cheerful chirps serve as a counterbalance to the weight of Cal's trauma and the stakes of his journey. Whether it's providing a much-needed stim pack in the heat of battle or scanning the environment to uncover secrets, BD-1's steadfast presence reminds both Cal and the player that even in moments of despair, there is always a way forward. But BD-1 is not just a tool or a sidekick. He is a true partner to Cal. This bond mirrors other iconic droid-human relationships in Star Wars: Luke and R2, Cassian and K-2SO, Rey and BB-8. But it also stands apart in its intimacy and subtlety, due, of course, to the nature of the medium. BD-1 is a constant companion not just to Cal, but the player, his chirps and gestures expressing volumes without a single word. This relationship highlights that core theme of Star Wars, the power of connection.
Friends of mine.
The sad story of BD-1's previous bond with Eno Cordova adds depth to his character. As a droid who has already experienced loss and carries the memories of his former Jedi companion, BD-1's willingness to open himself to Cal reflects the courage required to form new relationships after tragedy. In many ways, BD-1 serves as another mirror to Cal's own journey of healing and trust. droids often act as emotional anchors in Star Wars, providing moments of levity or solace in otherwise quite intense narratives. And BD-1 fills this role beautifully in Fallen Order and Survivor. His playful personality and endearing interactions, such as hopping onto Cal's back or curiously inspecting objects, the way he dives into the loot chests littered throughout levels, and the wonderful animations that are captured when climbing through the many tight spaces that disguise loading areas, add moments of joy that stand out against the darker backdrop of the story. These lighter moments do more than just entertain. They reinforce the emotional stakes by reminding players of what Cal is fighting for: companionship, connection, and the preservation of a galaxy where bonds like theirs can thrive. Whether he's raising a ray shield to save Cal from the Second Sister, or illuminating the darkened ruins of Zepho, BD-1 is a symbol of persistence and ingenuity. In gameplay terms, he provides invaluable support, of course, but narratively, he's a constant reminder that Cal is never truly alone. The stakes feel more personal because of BD-1. Players form a bond with the little droid through shared exploration, challenges, and triumphs. Losing BD-1, even momentarily in that moment on Ordo Eris I mentioned earlier, feels like losing a part of Cal's soul. The connection between them transcends the screen, making BD-1 not just a character, but a representation of the enduring friendships and alliances that define Star Wars. BD-1's role in Fallen Order and Survivor goes far beyond being a cute, helpful little droid. He's a symbol of hope, a beacon of light in Cal's darkest moments, and a reminder of what makes the fight worthwhile. In a franchise built on themes of resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of connection, BD-1's presence underscores one of Star Wars' most poignant truths. Even the smallest of companions can make the greatest difference.
I believe in you too, buddy. Yeah, you're right. There's still a chance. There's always a chance. Come on.
Ultimately, together, the crew of the Mantis becomes a surrogate family for Cal. Each member contributes to his healing in their own way, whether through mentorship, humor, or shared understanding. What makes these relationships so compelling is their authenticity, the wonderful writing of scenes, little moments, as well as the larger, bombastic ones. They don't always agree, and they don't always understand one another perfectly, but they all care, and they all choose to stick together despite their differences. Through these bonds, Fallen Order reminds us that healing isn't a solitary process. Cal's trauma might be uniquely his, but the journey to overcome it is enriched by the connections he makes along the way. In many ways, the Mantis Crew embodies the core ethos of the Jedi: strength through unity, hope through compassion, and resilience through shared purpose. For Cal, their support isn't just a source of comfort, it's a lifeline. And for the player, these relationships add a layer of emotional depth that makes the journey through Fallen Order feel not just like a story about survival, but one about rediscovery, renewal, and the enduring power of connection. In Fallen Order, Cal Kestis doesn't emerge as a flawless Jedi hero. He's scarred and hesitant, and still learning what it means to live with his pain. But by the end of Act 1 of our hero's tale, he's taken his first real steps toward healing. Not as a fully fledged Jedi yet, maybe, but certainly as a survivor rediscovering his purpose. Dagan Gera is one of the most compelling, yet underexplored characters in Jedi Survivor. A Force-sensitive Arcanian offshoot and former Jedi Knight of the High Republic era, Dagan was renowned for his exploratory spirit and commitment to the ideals of the Jedi Order. His discovery of Tanalorr, a paradise hidden within the perilous Kobo abyss, was intended to be his crowning achievement. A potential bastion for the Jedi on the Outer Rim, Tanalorr symbolized hope, growth, and security, particularly during an era where the Republic sought to extend its influence to the galaxy's fringes. At least, that's what I'm assuming. I'll get into the issues with the narrative surrounding Tanalorr soon enough. But anyway, what we do know is that what began as a noble vision gradually devolved into obsession. When the Jedi Council decreed that Tanalorr must be abandoned, likely due to the Nihil's destructive invasion, Dagan could not let go. The very qualities that made him a visionary, his determination, ambition, and passion, transformed into the seeds of his downfall. Unable to reconcile his dream with the realities of the Council's decision, Dagan turned against the Order, embracing the dark side in a desperate bid to reclaim Tanalorr. His betrayal marked him as a tragic figure, a Jedi whose vision of paradise became the catalyst for his destruction. When Cal Kestis unwittingly releases Dagan from his 2-century slumber in Bacta, the Arcanian is met with a galaxy that has moved on without him. The Jedi Order he once fought for has fallen, and the Republic he served has been replaced by the tyrannical Empire. Dagan's awakening is a moment of profound dissonance. To him, Tanalorr is not merely a memory. It's an unfulfilled promise, a purpose frozen in time. Only moments have passed for him. Yet the galaxy has shifted, and Dagan finds himself untethered, a relic of a bygone era clinging to a dream no one else remembers. This sets Dagan up as an intriguing antagonist for Cal. On the surface, Dagan is a foil to the young Jedi. Both are survivors of turbulent eras. Both grapple with the weight of loss, and both long for safety and purpose. But while Cal's journey has been one of healing through connection, leaning on his crew and striving to build a future, Dagan's path is one of isolation and bitterness. Tanalorr, to Dagan, is no longer a sanctuary for others. It's a monument to his ego and a reward for the perceived injustices he has endured. Dagan's obsession with Tanalorr mirrors Cal's own growing fixation on finding a safe haven for his crew and for Force-sensitive individuals hunted by the Empire. This parallel creates a thematic resonance between the two characters. It also serves as a warning. Dagan's fall illustrates the dangers of allowing trauma and, now, the added wrinkle of ambition, to fester unchecked. His inability to let go of Tanalorr becomes his undoing, transforming him into a tragic figure consumed by his past rather than inspired by it. Arrogance and pride dominate Dagan's personality, driving his disdain for others and his overconfidence in his own abilities. His impatience and lack of humility, noted by Santari Khri even before his fall, ultimately alienated him from his fellow Jedi. Yet these traits are interwoven with deep emotional vulnerabilities. His obsession with Tanalorr, a world he saw as a sanctuary and a symbol of his ideals, consumed him to the point of betrayal when the Jedi Order abandoned it. But Dagan's relationship with Khri adds a poignant layer to his character. Despite his disdain for most, Dagan harbored genuine affection and respect for her, describing her as the one he trusted the most. Their bond hinted at the possibility of humility and connection within him. But her refusal to join his vision for Tanalorr, and her severing of his arm during their confrontation, drove him over the edge into darkness. This blend of respect, hatred, and unfulfilled love haunted him, making Khri both his greatest strength and his fatal weakness. An interesting parallel to Cal's own found family. Her memory lingers as a volatile trigger throughout his interactions with Kestis, often leading to lapses in focus and judgment, something that, ultimately, allows Cal to gain the upper hand in their final duel. For Cal, Dagan represents a dark path he could easily tread. Both men are driven by a sense of responsibility, but where Cal seeks to protect and nurture, Dagan's obsession warps his intentions into something selfish and destructive. At multiple points throughout Survivor, we see Cal has grown confident in his abilities, bordering on arrogance, a through line from moments in Fallen Order 2. Each encounter with Dagan forces Cal to confront the possibility that his own relentless drive might lead him down a similar road. Despite the rich narrative potential, Survivor falters in fully exploring the dynamic between Cal and Dagan, which makes some sense with where the story ends up, and Dagan's role as ultimately a pretty minor antagonist. Their interactions are largely limited to combat sequences, which, while visually and mechanically engaging, lack the emotional depth needed to make their conflict resonate on a narrative level. The main issue I have here is the lack of motive for Dagan. We know he wants Tanalorr, but why? Arrogance alone isn't enough to hang this entire wing of the narrative journey of Survivor on. What is the draw for Dagan of Tanalorr? Because of the lack of time spent with him, we never really fleshed this out beyond that initial concept. The narrative shortcomings surrounding Tanalorr in Jedi Survivor are worth analysing, I think, because they highlight a missed opportunity for deeper player engagement and emotional investment in the narrative. Despite being framed as a central goal for multiple characters, Tanalorr feels strangely hollow as a MacGuffin, lacking the narrative weight to justify the obsessive desire that drives the story forward. One of the core issues is that the game never really fully establishes what sets Tanalorr apart from any other planet. We're told it's a refuge, hidden beyond the treacherous Kobo abyss, but we're not really shown why that matters on a deeper level. Why Tanalorr, and not some other secluded corner of the galaxy? Is it particularly rich in resources? Or strong in the Force? Does it have some unique property that makes it particularly resistant to Imperial incursions? The game leaves these questions unanswered, which weakens my understanding of why Cal, Dagan, or Bode would risk everything for it. For Dagan, Tanalorr is represented as a symbol of his fallen ideals, something he sees as his birthright. But even here, the narrative doesn't linger long enough to give us an emotional anchor for why he's so consumed by it. It's hard to empathize with his obsession when the planet is presented as little more than a barren, abandoned world, its symbolic potential for hope or safety barely explored. I mean, it's pretty in a generic sci-fi lost world sort of way, but I mean, Star Wars is full of pretty planets. Cal's motivations regarding Tanalorr are equally murky. On one hand, he sees it as a potential refuge for himself and his found family, a safe harbor where they can escape the Empire. On the other, he considers its value as a sanctuary for the hidden path and other survivors of Imperial persecution. The narrative never resolves this tension in a meaningful way, leaving his commitment to Tanalorr feeling inconsistent at best. Pragmatically, Tanalorr doesn't really seem particularly well suited to either purpose. The dangers of navigating the Kobo abyss, requiring a repaired star map and compass, not to mention extreme piloting skills, make it impractical as a location for the hidden path to funnel survivors, supplies, and materials on a regular basis. It's like building a castle with a moat and no drawbridge for easy access, when really, all you need is a storm shelter. Worse, it's a castle that doesn't actually stop invaders. I mean, the Nihil breached it during Dagan's time, forcing the Jedi to abandon it, so it's hard to buy into the idea that the Abyss provides enough protection to make Tanalorr worth the effort.
Sorry, Editor Craig chiming in for a second. Watching this back, I didn't expand on this point enough, I don't think. I'll try editing this next part in as smoothly as I can, but it might be a little jarring. Sorry for that. So, the game's own narrative choices actively contradict this whole Bastion premise, right? One of the most pivotal flashback sequences involving Dagan Gera reveals that Tanalorr was compromised during the High Republic era by the Nihil, a marauding group of space pirates. This event is central to Dagan's disillusionment with the Jedi, as their refusal to defend Tanalorr led to its abandonment. However, the game provides no compelling reason as to why the Nihil were able to breach Tanalorr's supposed security. as far as I can tell, there's no unique property attributed to them in the game that wouldn't also apply to the Empire. In fact, not to get too nitpicky, but the lore notes in the databank are, across the board pretty much, pretty poor at expanding on the lore of the game. If a chaotic band of pirates could overcome the challenges of the Kobo Abyss, it stands to reason that the Empire, with its vast resources and technological superiority, could do the same. For me, any credibility of Tanalorr as the impenetrable haven that the characters claim it to be goes out the window before it's even invited inside to take its shoes off. I can't really get over just how poorly the Nihil are integrated into the game's narrative, and I guess the High Republic era elements more broadly. While they're, of course, a major factor in the High Republic novels, their inclusion in Survivor feels tokenistic at best. The game provides little context or detail about who they are or why they matter, leaving their invasion of Tanalorr feeling hollow and disconnected from the main narrative. Why are they such a threat to the Jedi? How did they manage to breach Tanalorr? What made them formidable enough to force the Jedi to abandon their plans for the planet? For players unfamiliar with the High Republic, the Nihil are little more than faceless bad guys. In fact, we never even see any of them. The game misses an opportunity to explore their unique abilities and ideology, which would have made their role in Dagan's backstory and Tanalorr's fall more impactful. If the Nihil can get to Tanalorr, why can't the Empire? Sorry to harp on this point, but for me, this unanswered question undermines the idea of Tanalorr as a safe haven. The answer should be important. The game should be providing a concrete answer to these sorts of questions, to keep me invested in the emotional stakes of the story. Instead, I'm constantly getting distracted by these issues. Without sufficiently exploring their motivations or capabilities, the Nihil's role in the story feels more like a narrative convenience, a hand-waving excuse, rather than becoming an integral part of the world building. This lack of depth diminishes the stakes of Dagan's fall to the dark side and leaves me wondering why Tanalorr was ever considered a safe place in the first place. As a minor aside, is it actually even possible for Dagan to have survived in the tank for as long as he did? Does Bacta actually sustain you indefinitely? Would the facility retain a constant power supply for, 200 years? Without maintenance? I know that these may seem like nitpicking or trivial in the wider scope of the game, but it's these smaller details that start to fray the fabric of the narrative tapestry. The story loses momentum in these small details, and those bigger moments struggle to stand up as these issues keep piling up. Are the Jedi of the High Republic era different to what we would expect? The game doesn't tell us. From external material, we know High Republic Jedi are more idealistic and exploratory, often working in tandem with the Republic to expand into uncharted territories. But Survivor never makes this clear. Are Dagan's ambitions for Tanalorr reflective of the broader Jedi ethos of this time, or is he an outlier? Without any context, Dagan's motivations begin to feel shallow. Was he driven by a personal vision, or was his fall to the dark side a byproduct of the Jedi Order's systemic flaws during this era? The game ultimately leaves these potentially rich threads dangling. Sure. While it's true that some answers to these questions can be found in High Republic novels and comics, relying on external material to fill in critical narrative gaps is, in my view, a disservice to the player and the story that you're ultimately telling. A narrative should stand on its own, especially when it's introducing lore-heavy elements that are crucial to the story. If the High Republic era is going to take up such a large portion of the game's runtime, it needs to be fleshed out within the game itself. Without grounding the High Republic elements, the narrative struggles to make its stakes and characters compelling for me. Dagan's fall, the Nihil's role, and Tanalorr's importance all hinge on lore that's barely explored in the game. By keeping the player at arm's length from this context, Survivor misses the chance to create a richer, more immersive story, if these elements had been more fully realised. the game could have delivered a narrative as impactful as its best gameplay moments. Instead, it leaves players, or maybe just me I guess, asking, why does this matter? A question no story should leave unanswered. This narrative contradiction seems to stem from a structural problem as far as I can tell. The writers needed Tanalorr to be both desirable, as a hidden refuge, and abandoned, to explain its obscurity and to make it available to Cal and his allies. You can't really have it be the result of a natural cataclysm or a plague or something of that variety, anything that would render the world inhospitable. The solution they chose, having the Nihil force the Jedi to leave, creates more problems than it solves. It asks the player to accept that Tanalorr is simultaneously a bastion of safety and a world that was already compromised by a group far less powerful than the Empire. In the end, Tanalorr's shortcomings as a plot device just end up showcasing the pitfalls of trying to serve multiple narrative purposes at once. Its conceptual promise is constantly undermined by the very history the game provides for it, making it difficult for me to buy into the characters' motivations and the stakes of the story. Okay, where was I?
This disconnect undercuts the stakes for me. We're told Tanalorr is worth fighting for, repeatedly, but we're never shown why it's truly indispensable. Without that clarity, it's difficult to care about Cal's internal conflict, or his evolving vision for what Tanalorr could represent. Imagine a world where Dagan challenged Cal with dialogue, questioning his motives and planting seeds of doubt about his quest for Tanalorr. Perhaps if his turn had been drawn out further, Dagan could have served as a mentor turned cautionary tale, offering glimpses of the Jedi philosophy twisted by pain and obsession. Instead, the game's focus on action leaves much of Dagan's story untold, reducing him to a powerful but underdeveloped adversary. Let's try going a little deeper. So at its core, Tanalorr represents something different to each character. For Dagan, it's a symbol of his unfulfilled ambition and the life he believes was stolen from him. For Cal, it's the beacon of hope, a chance to protect his crew and carve out a future in a galaxy dominated by fear. For Bode, a character I'll spend some time with in a moment, Tanalorr is a chance for a fresh start with his daughter. This duality imbues their conflict with thematic significance, even if the narrative doesn't always capitalize on it. Defeating Dagan leaves Cal questioning his own motives and methods. How much of his pursuit of Tanalorr is about protecting others, and how much is about his own need for control in an uncontrollable galaxy? These questions linger as Cal's journey continues, shaping his decisions and his relationships with those around him. Ultimately, Dagan Gera is more than just a villain. As seems to be a theme of the villains in the Jedi series, he's a test of Cal's character, a reflection of his potential to fall, and a cautionary tale of what happens when hope turns into obsession. While the game misses opportunities to deepen this dynamic, themes Dagan represents, ambition, loss, and the struggle to find purpose, do add richness to Cal's journey and elevate the quest for Tanalorr beyond a mere MacGuffin. In confronting Dagan, Cal not only defeats an external enemy, but also takes a step closer to understanding the kind of Jedi and the kind of person he wants to be. Early in Survivor, Cal has found an unlikely ally in Bode, Akuna, a former mercenary and father who becomes a steadfast companion in the search for Tanalorr, that mythical sanctuary that promises safety from the Empire. Bode's easygoing demeanor, his skill in combat, and his fierce devotion to his daughter Carter make him an immediate contrast to Cal, who carries the weight of his past with solemn determination. Together, over the course of the events of the game, they form a bond forged in shared purpose, working as a team to navigate the galaxy's dangers. But beneath the camaraderie lies the seed of a devastating betrayal. Bode's ultimate turn to the dark side, and his reveal as an Imperial spy, marks a pivotal moment in Cal's journey. one that forces him to grapple with the fragility of trust, the depths of betrayal, and his own proximity to the dark side. At least, I think that was the writer's intentions with this character. For me, and from looking at comments online, for most folk, the execution of Bode's character's writing immediately paints him as untrustworthy, and undermines any attempts at generating legitimate shock in the twists and turns of his character journey. The overly familiar, overly intimate tone that the writers have adopted from the get-go paint Bode as sleazy and make me dread any interaction Cal, and especially BD1, has with him. This is their first time meeting. Just dial it back. And do you really expect me to believe that Saw Gerrera recruited this stereotypical used car salesman? This is not intended to be a critique of the actor, by the way, who does an excellent job at selling the pain that is the undercurrent to so much of Bode's arc, but the writing he's been given is an odd step backward from the arcs of Fallen Order. Bode's character may resonate with you, in which case the twist likely worked a lot better. I wish I could have experienced that. But where the writers of this series are usually so great at writing layered, nuanced dialogue and opening characters up over time, Bode's character, so centrally important to Survivor's narrative, is dealt with in such a heavy-handed manner it undermines a lot of the thematic weight of this game. Fallen Order's narrative stands head and shoulders above Survivor, even while the sequel improves the actual mechanical experience of playing the game. Something we'll get onto in episode 2. You can check the chapter select in the description for timecodes. Bode is, like so many of the characters we have examined together, a mirror for Cal. A man shaped by survival and defined by loss. While Cal clings to the Jedi ideals instilled in him by Jara Tapal, Bode's choices reflect a different path. One where survival comes at any cost. His love for his daughter Kata is the driving force behind every decision he makes. It's a love that Cal can recognize, maybe even admire, as it echoes his own desire to protect those he cares about. This parallel is of course intentional, setting up Bode as a reflection of what Cal could become if he allowed his anger, fear and desperation to consume him. But where Cal strives to honor the sacrifices of those who came before him, Bode's path is one of compromise, of sacrificing his morality and allegiance to ensure Kata's safety. As I mentioned before, the revelation of Bode's betrayal is sudden and jarring, and, ultimately, predictable. After fighting alongside Cal and earning his trust throughout the Dagan arc that makes up over half the full runtime of the game, Bode's true alliance is revealed in a moment that should have been emotionally devastating, but falls short of its full potential. Bode's motivations, to protect Kata at all costs, are understandable and even generically sympathetic. Sure, father wants to protect daughter, I get that. Yet, the lack of narrative groundwork leaves the betrayal feeling hollow. Let me explain what I mean. Bode's journey from Jedi Knight to Imperial Agent is interesting, and, interestingly, predominantly told through audio logs. As a word of advice from somebody who has never written a video game narrative, don't use missable audio logs to convey important story details, especially if your final act relies heavily on the player knowing and feeling that information. Bode's backstory, his role as a Republic intelligence operative during the Clone Wars, his adaptation to deception and survival, and the harrowing events of Order 66 lays a solid foundation for his actions. His wife Tayala's murder by the Inquisitorius and his subsequent deal struck with the Imperial Security Bureau are compelling motivations. Bode's love for his daughter Kata drives his every decision, creating a tragic conflict between his desperate desire to protect her and his betrayal of his Jedi heritage. However, much of this emotional depth is relegated to audio logs and the last-minute scene on Nova Garan, leaving it frustratingly disconnected from the main narrative. Relying on optional collectibles to flesh out a character's motivations, especially when that motivation drives the climax, is always going to be a risky storytelling choice. and here I think it undermines Bode's impact. The larger issue lies in how impersonal Bode feels leading up to his betrayal. While he is charming, quippy, and eager to engage with Cal, his character remains frustratingly superficial. He takes an unusually intimate interest in Cal's budding romance with Merrin, and plays the part of a supportive friend, but he never truly opens up. The game withholds key details about his past, most glaringly the existence and importance of Teala, until after the betrayal. By then it's too late to develop meaningful sympathy for Bode. The audience is expected to retroactively empathize with a man they barely knew, and his descent into darkness feels abrupt rather than tragic. This lack of early humanization is, for me, a significant missed opportunity. If Bode had been allowed to share his story over the course of the game, particularly during that earlier Dagan arc, his eventual turn could have felt more earned. Imagine Bode confiding in Cal about Teala, about the trauma of Order 66, and the lengths he has gone to protect Kata. Flashbacks or intimate moments of vulnerability could have brought Teala to life as more than a plot device, a real character whose loss is palpable. These moments would not only deepen Bode's humanity, but allow the audience to feel the weight of his struggle and connect with him as a flawed human being, struggling in the same way as Cal. Yes, revealing these details early might signpost his betrayal, but predictable storytelling isn't inherently bad, and ultimately, Bode's story is fairly predictable either way. When audiences see where a story is headed, and are emotionally invested in its characters, the eventual payoff becomes all the more powerful. The recent obsession with shock value and subverting expectations, evident in polarizing narratives like Game of Thrones' final seasons or The Last Jedi, often comes at the expense of believable, grounded arcs. Foreknowledge of a twist doesn't ruin a story if the journey to that twist is compelling. By prioritizing emotional resonance over surprise, Bode's arc could have been a heartbreaking exploration of love, fear, and the costs of desperation. Teala's role in his life could have been celebrated, rather than reduced to a moment of fridging, a shortcut to justify his villainous turn. In doing so, Bode's betrayal would carry the tragedy it deserves, and his fall from grace could resonate, not as a shocking twist, but as a gut-wrenching inevitability. Bode's love for Teala and Kata becomes his justification for his actions, betraying his former allies and ideals. The decision to work for the ISB under Denvik highlights the corrupting influence of fear and desperation, as Bode sacrifices his integrity and others' lives to ensure his daughter's safety. While, for me, the emotional gut punch is lacking, Bode's betrayal of Cal and the Hidden Order is shocking in the moment, not only because of its timing, but also due to its devastating consequences. Bode's decision to alert the Empire to the Anchorite base, and later kill Master Cordova, epitomizes his prioritization of personal stakes over the collective good. His betrayal is underscored by his internal conflict. He nearly decides against alerting the Empire, and apologizes to Cal, suggesting that he is aware of the monstrousness of his actions, but feels cornered by the circumstances, and Cal's insistence on seeing Tanalorr as key to the hidden path. The scene at the bonfire, where Bode and Cal share an all too infrequent moment of apparent trust, contrasts sharply with the violence that follows. Bode's hesitance, followed by his ultimate choice to betray, goes some way to make his actions feel simultaneously inevitable and heartbreaking. As with his whole arc, I just wish we had been brought on that journey with Bode, so we could really feel his pain. When confronted by Cal on Nova Garon, Bode's justification, that his choices are driven by a responsibility that Cal, as a survivor without family, cannot understand, presents an intriguing ethical conflict. His view of Tanalorr as a sanctuary for himself and Kata, rather than a haven for the hidden path, definitely reflects his focus of personal safety over broader ideals, the ideals of the Jedi Order he once served. Well, they're long gone. This self-centeredness clashes with the Jedi philosophy of selflessness, but it is grounded in those relatable human emotions of love and fear. But as we've already touched on, As with both Dagan's and Cal's motivations for seeing Tanalorr as a sanctuary, I have to question why Bode sees Tanalorr as the answer. His goal is pretty simple, right? To protect his daughter, Cata, and give her a life free from the Empire's grasp. But Tanalorr, as it's presented to us in the game, doesn't really seem like a viable solution to that problem. It's an abandoned, desolate planet with no infrastructure, community, or resources. What kind of life is Bode envisioning for his daughter in a permanent state of isolation, with no one but himself for company? I guess this critique could, in theory, be softened by framing Bode as a desperate, broken man clinging to unrealistic dreams. But his actions throughout the game are calculated, even methodical, suggesting he's not operating on blind impulse. His love for Cata is genuine, I'm sure, but the extreme lengths he goes to, murdering Eno Cordova, summoning Vader to destroy Cal and Cere, are jarring in their intensity. They don't align with the calm, strategic persona he's maintained up until that point, nor do they feel particularly justified by the narrative value of Tanalorr. Editing Craig chiming in again, sorry. I just wanted to expand a little on why I find Bode's actions so jarring. So Bode's reasoning is simple enough on paper. He wants to protect his daughter from the Empire. He's seen firsthand how cruel and oppressive they are, and he'll do anything to shield her from that life. Fair enough. Parental love is a relatable and powerful motivator. But the way he goes about it is so over the top that it starts to feel disconnected from his stated goals. Take the moment he kills Cordova. Here's a guy who's no immediate threat to Bode or Cata. He's an ally. Someone Bode has been working with and presumably trusting for a while. And yet Bode doesn't hesitate. Not for a second. Why? Because Cordova might help Cal secure Tanalorr, a place that Bode thinks could eventually draw Imperial attention? It's also speculative, and the violence feels so disproportionate to the situation. I have a dog, Austin. He's sat on my feet as I'm recording this voiceover. He's a cool little guy, full of energy, and frankly, I'd do a lot to protect him. I walk through rain, I've climbed mountains with him, maybe even sit through a Rise of Skywalker rewatch. What can I say, he's got poor taste in movies. But would I sabotage a team of friends and colleagues, murder someone in cold blood, and sell out an entire resistance movement on the off chance that it might help protect him? I don't think I could. And it's that disconnect between motivation and action that makes Bode's choices hard to buy into emotionally. One of the key issues is that Cata doesn't seem to be under any kind of immediate threat. As far as we know, she's been relatively safe. Bode feels comfortable at least to leave her on Nova Garan, smack in the middle of an ISB facility, while he gallivants around with Cal and the gang. If the Empire isn't actively hunting her or closing in on her location, then why is Bode jumping to such extremes? If Cata were in immediate danger, if, say, she had been in hiding and the Empire had discovered her and was closing in, it might make more sense. The stakes would feel tangible, and Bode's desperation would be more relatable, but the game doesn't give us that context. Instead, we're left to fill in the gaps ourselves, which makes Bode's actions feel less like a desperate father's last resort, and more like the impulsive choices of a man whose logic has gone out the window. Another thing that doesn't quite add up is how Bode's extreme paranoia squares with his willingness to let Cata stay with the Empire while he works with Cal. If he's so convinced that anyone could endanger his daughter, why not just cut ties and run immediately? Why put himself in a situation where he has to betray Cal and the rest of the team? It makes his motivations feel inconsistent, like the writers were more concerned with delivering a shocking twist than building a coherent character arc. Here's the thing, Bode's arc could have worked if the game had shown us more of his backstory, his fear, his trauma, the lengths he's gone to already for Kata. It might have been easier to buy into his actions. If Kata had been in active danger, the stakes would have felt more immediate, and Bode's betrayal might have felt like a tragic inevitability, rather than a nonsensical twist. At the end of the day, I think Austin would agree with me. Love and protection are powerful motivators, but they don't excuse extreme and disproportionate actions. If Bode had been a little more grounded, or if his circumstances had been more immediately dire, his betrayal might have felt like a gut punch instead of a head-scratcher. As it stands, though, it's hard to shake the feeling that the writers put shock value over substance. And that's something Austin and I just can't get behind. Okay, back to the video. I guess Bode's obsession with Tanalorr could have been reframed as the result of grief and desperation clouding his judgment. His fall to the dark side could have been more gradual and telegraphed to the player in an intentional way. If the game emphasized his psychological unraveling, his extreme actions could feel maybe a little more consistent and tragic. Ultimately, the game spends too little time building the bond between Cal and Bode, relying on a few quips and combat sequences to sell their camaraderie, instead of doing the hard work of establishing a real relationship that takes time to open up and blossom. While there are moments that suggest a burgeoning friendship, they're too shallow to make the betrayal feel like a knife in the heart. Instead, it comes off as a twist for the sake of drama, rather than the natural culmination of a deeply personal conflict. Just as a quick aside, and because I don't really have anywhere else to fit it, an observation and a question more than anything, I suppose. Is anyone else surprised to see Eno Cordova on Jedha? I guess it's never outright stated in Fallen Order, so I'm not really sure where this idea came from in my own mind, but I really thought he'd perished before the events of the game. As if Bode's betrayal weren't enough, this act of the game also delivers another devastating blow for Cal, the loss of Cere Junda. In a climactic confrontation with Darth Vader, Cere sacrifices herself to give Cal and the rest of the Mantis Crew a fighting chance to escape the Imperial ambush on Jedha. The fight with Vader is an obvious highlight of the game. The burning archives act as an effective and dramatic backdrop to a conflict teased at the close of Fallen Order. Vader's attacks are powerful, aggressive, and relentless. While Cere is clearly a Master Jedi at this point, and she gives a valiant last stand, we already know the outcome. Cere's death at the hands of Darth Vader in Survivor is a powerful, layered moment that brings her arc full circle, closing it with both tragedy and triumph. It's a culmination that pays off her personal struggles with guilt and anger, while providing Cal with a crucial turning point in his own journey. Cere's sacrifice directly mirrors the loss of Cal's first mentor, Jaro Tapal, during Order 66. Much like Jaro, Cere gives her life to protect Cal, embodying the ultimate role of a Jedi mentor. But while Jaro's sacrifice was tinged with the desperation of chaos and betrayal, Cere's is deliberate and resolute. She dies not out of desperation, but as an act of redemption and acceptance. For Cal, losing yet another mentor echoes the same pain and fear he's carried since the Purge. But Cere's death pushes him even closer to the edge of the dark side. As we see later in the story, her sacrifice is that turning point. It strengthens his resolve to protect those he loves, but also leaves him vulnerable to his anger and grief. Much like Anakin Skywalker's trajectory in that Tusken hut in Attack of the Clones. Something I will talk about much later in the video. It's clear how loss can become a dangerous catalyst for something darker. As I say, Cere's death is the resolution of her redemption arc. A deeply meaningful transformation for a character haunted by guilt. When we first meet her in Fallen Order, Cere's deeply scarred by her failure to save Trilla, her former Padawan. She has shut herself off from the Force as a means of atonement and avoiding what she sees as an inevitable fall to the dark side. But the self-loathing she has carried since then had kept her trapped in that pain, that moment, that regret. Her brief brush with the dark side on Nur only solidified how dangerous those unresolved feelings were. By the time Survivor begins, Cere has made progress towards self-forgiveness. In line with the Star Wars storytelling lineage, lots of development has clearly happened off-screen. We quickly catch up with why she left the crew of the Mantis. She has dedicated herself to the hidden path, helping those who cannot help themselves, and quietly rebuilding her connection to the Jedi ideals. But it's in her final act, sacrificing herself to give Cal and the hidden path a chance, that she finally achieves true redemption. Cere's story is a rare example of someone truly coming back from the edge of the dark side. By George Lucas's definition, falling to the dark side comes from a place of fear, anger, and pain, emotions that cloud judgment and erode the light. Once someone is given into those feelings, returning to the light is seen as nearly impossible, and yet Cere does it. She overcomes her anger, her guilt, her self-hatred. She dies not as a fallen Jedi seeking redemption, but as a Jedi who has found peace. Her sacrifice is a mournful triumph, one that should be celebrated for what it represents. Because Cere's journey is one of healing. Where once she was lost in grief and anger, disgusted at herself for surrendering her Padawan to the Empire, she finds the strength to forgive herself and act as the Jedi she was always meant to be. Her sacrifice for Cal and the hidden path cements that return to the light, not as a warrior consumed by vengeance, but as a mentor, a protector, and a symbol of hope. It's an interesting choice to have Cere's path line up with Vader's own arc in the original trilogy. Lost in pain and anger, finding forgiveness and redemption, and sacrificing themselves for love. Her death is a bittersweet triumph. It marks the end of that arc, but it leaves a lasting legacy for Cal and the player, a reminder that redemption is possible, that forgiveness begins from within, and that even in the face of darkness, the light can endure. This dual loss, of a trusted ally and a beloved mentor, forms the emotional crux as we head into Survivor's endgame. It's a moment that should feel like the culmination of Cal's journey, through betrayal, anger, and resilience. But while the themes are compelling, the execution falters. Bode's betrayal in particular lacks the narrative weight to truly feel devastating, and the game misses an opportunity to fully explore Cal's inner turmoil in the aftermath of Cere's death. Despite its narrative shortcomings, this part of Jedi Survivor does still raise compelling questions about trust, survival, and the cost of love. Bode's turn to the dark side isn't born of malice, but of despair, a reminder that even good intentions can lead to darkness. Of course, the reveal that Bode has been working with the ISB this entire time muddies the waters a little on that front. Cere's death, meanwhile, serves as a sobering reminder of the sacrifices inherent in the Jedi path. Her final stand against Vader is a testament to her strength, but also a reminder of the fragility of even the most powerful Jedi. In losing Cere, Cal is forced to step fully into his role as a Jedi Knight, carrying the weight of her legacy, even as he struggles to reconcile his own pain. Here we have a study in contrasts, of friendship and betrayal, light and dark, hope and despair. It's a turning point in Cal's journey, one that will leave him forever changed. While the narrative doesn't always live up to its thematic potential, the emotional resonance of these moments lingers, setting the stage for the final act of Cal's journey. The climax of Star Wars Jedi Survivor is a confrontation not just between Cal Kestis and Bode Akuna, but between Cal and the darkest corners of himself. It's the moment where the threads of Cal's journey, his struggles with trauma, the weight of responsibility, and the allure of power are tested against the choices he makes when faced with betrayal, fear, and anger. The infiltration of Nova Garan is one of Jedi Survivor's most tense and emotionally charged sequences. After the devastating loss of Cere, Cordova, and the Archive, the team is grieving, not only for the people they've lost, but also for the dream of a safe haven. With only 3 surviving books from the archive, the weight of their mission feels heavier than ever. However, Cal refuses to let his anguish take hold. When he notices a faint signal from the locator beacon he gave Bode back on Coruscant, the team chooses to follow it, fully aware it's likely a trap. This sets the stage for Nova Garon, an Imperial ISB station simmering with tension as Vader and the Inquisitorius attempt to tighten their grip on the Empire's intelligence branch. Cal sneaks in with surgical precision, moving through maintenance shafts and air vents as the base hums with paranoia. But stealth doesn't last too long. Security eventually spots him, triggering a base-wide lockdown and forcing Cal into a brutal clash with ISB forces. The tone here is dark as Cal makes his way to Commander Denvik, the officer who orchestrated Bode's betrayal. Enraged and grieving, Cal's anger boils over as he violently interrogates the desperate officer, showcasing his growing internal conflict. This scene highlights Cal's fragile state, his precise control slipping, and we see glimpses of the darkness he's capable of when pushed too far. Once Cal knocks out Denvik, the sequence takes a more subdued, but no less impactful turn, as Cal infiltrates Bode's quarters. Here, Survivor pulls back the curtain on Bode's motivations, providing a powerful moment of quiet tension. When Cal encounters Bode's daughter, Carter, we see the human cost of Bode's betrayal. The scene feels eerily calm as Cal helps the child find her lost doll, only for Bode to enter and the facade to shatter. Cal's descent to the dark side on Nova Garon is a pivotal moment in Jedi Survivor, revealing the fragility of his moral center after the devastating losses of Cere and Bold's falseness. Up to this point, Cal has been the quintessential Jedi, struggling, sure, but always striving to embody the ideals of balance, self-control, and justice. Yet, in this moment of raw pain and unchecked anger, the veneer cracks and the dark side takes hold. The gameplay brilliantly reflects this shift. Cal's signature Force Slow, an ability that typically freezes enemies in place, becomes something darker and more violent. Instead of merely slowing his opponents, this dark side variation paralyzes them in a crushing wave of Force energy, a manifestation of his rage. It's subtle but effective. The dark side doesn't just empower him, it dominates his enemies. His combat style changes too, while tapped into the dark side. The usual flexibility of choosing saber stances, one of the most rewarding and versatile mechanics in Survivor, is stripped away. Clouded by fury, Cal is left with only the single blade stance. It's a deliberate design choice that underscores the narrative. When consumed by the dark side, judgment is lost, choices narrow, and aggression becomes the only answer. Attacks are faster, more brutal, and significantly more lethal. Cal's power spikes dramatically, reflecting how seductive the dark side can be. It offers immediate results, but at a cost to one's humanity. As Cal storms through Nova Garon, we see the full consequences of his emotional breaking point. ISB officers, scout troopers, anyone in his path are ruthlessly cut down. These Imperials are not Sith, they're not monstrous enemies, they're just people doing their jobs. Cal's merciless aggression makes this section of the game feel different from other encounters. There's no sense of measured precision or heroic combat, just raw, unrelenting violence. It's almost uncomfortable, as it probably should be. We've seen glimpses of Jedi walking this path before. Anakin's Tusken massacre in Attack of the Clones, or Luke's aggressive assault on Vader in Return of the Jedi. And now, we see Cal teeter dangerously close to the same abyss. This sequence culminates in the confrontation with Denvik, the ISB officer, who tries and fails to fight back. Cal doesn't just disarm him, he lifts Denvik into the air by the throat with the Force, a gesture that is unmistakably Sith-like. In that moment we see how far Cal is slipping. It's an inversion of his usual approach to combat, where he deflects and counters in defense. Now he commands the scene. It's Merrin's intervention that pulls him back from the brink. Her plea is as much for herself as it is for him. Merrin, who, as we've explored, has experienced loss, that feeling of vengeance, and the temptation of darkness, knows where that path leads. She sees what Cal is becoming and it terrifies her. Her words are a lifeline, grounding Cal before it's too late to do something he can't take back. This moment of darkness serves as a turning point again for Cal's character. Up until now, his journey has been defined by resilience, persistence, and determination, fighting the Empire, protecting his found family, and helping the Hidden Path. But grief and loss have pushed him to his breaking point. His embrace of the dark side isn't just a narrative beat, it's a commentary on the dangers of unchecked emotion, even in someone as noble as Cal. This echoes one of Star Wars' oldest themes, of course. The dark side is easier, quicker, and more seductive. It's not just about power, it's about control, a way to lash out and ease the pain inside. In the short term, Cal's fury makes him stronger. He feels unstoppable. But that power comes at the cost of his identity as a Jedi. And the moment Merrin pulls him back highlights just how precarious that balance is. As I say, Cal's outburst mirrors Anakin Skywalker's descent into the dark side in the Tusken Raider camp on Tatooine. Much like Anakin, Cal's brush with the dark side is rooted in love, loss, and the fear of losing those closest to him. Both characters experience that breaking point, where their anger overcomes their training. For Anakin, the death of his mother. For Cal, the death of his master and friend. And both are dangerously effective when consumed by that rage. But where, as we know, Anakin ultimately succumbs, Cal is pulled back by his connection to Merrin and his crew. It's a small but significant difference, one that shows just how vital his found family is to keeping him grounded. Cal's brush with the dark side on Nova Garen reminds us that his journey is far from over. The anger and grief that boil over in this moment won't disappear when the fight ends. They linger, a shadow at the edge of his mind. The game doesn't shy away from the complexity of his emotions, and it leaves us wondering just how close Cal might come to falling, if pushed even further. For Cal and for the player, Nova Garen is a chilling reminder. The dark side doesn't come from nowhere. It creeps in slowly, feeding on trauma. And while it offers strength, it threatens to consume everything else in the process. The final confrontation between Cal and Bode is layered with the emotional stakes. On the surface, it's a battle for control of Tanalorr, the hidden sanctuary that represents freedom and hope. But beneath the surface, it's a duel of philosophies and a test of Cal's character. Bode's fall is rooted in his inability to trust anyone but himself. His belief that only he can protect Kata leads him to betrayal and ultimately to isolation. For Cal, the battle isn't just about defeating Bode. It's about proving to himself that he can hold on to his ideals, even when the dark side tempts him to take shortcuts. The fight is as much internal as it is external, with every strike against Bode threatening to pull Cal further into the abyss of his own suffering. When Bode is finally defeated, the moment feels less triumphant and more hollow. His death, while necessary to resolve the conflict, carries a sense of futility. The tragedy of Bode's arc lies in its missed potential. The game doesn't delve deeply enough into his motivations, leaving his betrayal and ultimate demise feeling somewhat underwhelming. There's a lack of emotional closure, both for Cal and for the audience, as Bode's choice remains only partially explored. The decision to take in Kata adds a bittersweet note, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the wreckage. But it also raises questions about Cal's readiness to take on such responsibility. Kata is a reminder of what Bode fought to protect, and in taking her under his wing, Cal must grapple with the legacy of Bode's choices and the shadow they're going to cast over the future.
The battle with Bode leaves Cal victorious, but at a heavy cost. He has reaffirmed his commitment to the Jedi path, choosing to resist the pull of the dark side, even when it might have been the easier option, but the scars of his journey linger. Cal's experiences with Bode force him to confront the uncomfortable truth about himself. How far is he willing to go to protect those he loves? Can he truly avoid the dark side when the galaxy offers so few alternatives? These questions remain unresolved, and perhaps that's the point. Cal's journey hasn't been about finding neat answers. It's about continuing to strive for balance, even when the odds are stacked against him. The ending of Survivor leaves Cal in a precarious position. He's still a Jedi, but he's also someone who has walked dangerously close to the edge. The loss of Cere and the betrayal by Bode weigh heavily on him, and the responsibility of caring for Cata is going to add a new layer of complexity to his life moving forward. This isn't a story of definitive victories. It's a story about resilience, about choosing to hope even when despair feels inevitable. While the game's resolution doesn't fully capitalize on the emotional depth of Bode's arc, it does succeed in leaving Cal's journey open-ended, a reflection of the uncertainty and struggle that define life in a galaxy under Imperial rule. In the end, the confrontation with Bode is less about defeating an enemy, and more about reaffirming Cal's belief in the Jedi way. It's a reminder that the fight against the dark side isn't won in a single moment. It's a constant battle, one that Cal must face every day as he carves out a path forward in a galaxy consumed by darkness. One thing I've noticed in Fallen Order and Survivor's villains is that we have an almost perfectly inverse play on Yoda's warning about the dark side in Phantom Menace. This serves as a perfect framework for analysing the antagonists in these games. Each villain represents a distinct stage of the dark side's seductive progression, showcasing how the Jedi can fall when consumed by emotion. Bode is driven entirely by fear. Fear of losing his daughter, fear of the Empire finding him, fear of being powerless to protect what little he has left. His actions are shaped by that overwhelming need for safety and control. Fear drives him to betray the people who trusted him, to murder allies like Cordova, and even to risk summoning Vader himself. In Bode, we see the dark side's first step, fear clouding judgment, and twisting love, the love he has for his daughter, into something destructive. Dagan embodies that next stage, anger. He is consumed by fury at what he perceives as betrayal, both by the Jedi Order and the galaxy itself. His obsession with Tanalorr as a symbol of what was stolen from him makes him unable to move on or accept reality. His anger festers for centuries in his cryosleep, leaving him as a bitter shell of a Jedi. He lashes out, seeking vengeance for the betrayal that robbed him of his dreams, and that anger blinds him to reason, consuming him completely.
My home, and they just expected me to throw it away.
Trilla is the embodiment of hatred. Her hatred stems from betrayal, not just by the Jedi as a whole, but by her former master Cere, whom she believes abandoned her. Unlike Bode's fearful desperation or Dagan's blind rage, Trilla's hatred is cold and focused. She directs it at herself, at the Jedi, and at the galaxy at large. Her transformation into the Second Sister shows the end result of a Jedi fully consumed by hatred, an Inquisitor, serving the very darkness that destroyed her. Yet beneath that hatred lies pain, a reminder of how far the dark side has taken her. And then there's Vader, who encapsulates all three stages: fear, anger, and hatred. Fear led Anakin to fall. Fear of losing Padme. Fear of powerlessness. That fear turned to anger as he lashed out at the Jedi and anyone who stood in his way. And that anger solidified into hatred, leading him to become the enforcer of the Empire and the symbol of suffering across the galaxy. Vader is the ultimate warning of the dark side's power and its cost. A fallen Jedi who fully embraced the progression Yoda warned against.
Cal's journey isn't just about fighting enemies. It's about resisting the very same temptations that consumed each of them. Each villain is a reflection of what Cal could become if he let his emotions control him. Bode's fear, Dagan's anger, Trilla's hatred. They're all cautionary tales for a Jedi walking the knife's edge between light and dark. The inevitable inclusion of Vader serves as a chilling reminder that succumbing to any one of these emotions can set someone down a path from which they cannot return easily. By the end of Survivor, as Cal flirts with the dark side, we see just how easy it is for even the strongest Jedi to take that step. Yoda's words ring truer than ever. Echoed through the game's storytelling, the dark side is a slippery slope, and its consequences are inescapable. It's an incredibly rich thematic through-line, and it ties the villains and Cal's struggles beautifully back to the heart of what Star Wars has always been about. Both Star Wars Jedi, Fallen Order, and Survivor are rightly celebrated for their metroidvania-inspired design, blending exploration, platforming, and combat into an intricate web of progression. However, while Fallen Order executes this formula with a tight focus, Survivor expands into an open-world format that brings both strengths and weaknesses. Let's dive into those elements, from level design to progression and tutorials, to examine how each game approaches its gameplay philosophy. The Metroidvania design of Star Wars, Jedi, Fallen Order, and Jedi Survivor doesn't just hit the genre's usual beats. Though the fairly safe and standard combination of power-ups like wall jumps, double jumps, air dashes are going to be pretty familiar to any Metroidvania fans. What makes me love this rendition of Seen Before systems is by weaving gameplay mechanics directly into the story of Cal Kestis rediscovering his connection to the Force. For fans of Star Wars and tight, smart level design, this is where the series really shines. So let's break it down. Alright, so if you've played any Metroidvania game, you know what to expect. Abilities unlock progressively, paths you couldn't access before suddenly open up, and the game keeps nudging you to backtrack and uncover new secrets. It's a classic formula, and these games are certainly not doing anything particularly new. But what Fallen Order nails is how those mechanics perfectly reflect Cal's journey as a Padawan who starts off battered, broken, and cut off from the Force. Early in the game, you can't do much. There's no double jump, no force push, no fancy lightsaber tricks. It's all designed to make you feel Cal's struggle. He's no Jedi Knight. He's just a guy with a lightsaber and a lot of baggage. As you progress, unlocking abilities feels meaningful, not just because it opens new gameplay options, but because it's tied to Cal remembering who he used to be and figuring out who he needs to become in a dangerous galaxy. It's a smart, Star Wars-worthy take on the genre. Jedi philosophy is all about patience, persistence, and personal growth, and Fallen Order builds those ideals right into the gameplay loop. Every time you unlock a new Force ability, it's like Cal is taking one more step out of the shadow of Order 66, and you, the player, feel that growth too mechanically. The game's tutorials are seamlessly baked into Cal's backstory. When you're learning a new ability, like wall running or Force pull, it's not just a gameplay moment. It's a flashback to Cal's training with his old master Jara Tapal. These moments are pulling double duty. First, they teach you the mechanics without ever making you feel like the game's holding your hand. And second, they're emotionally heavy. You're seeing Cal as a young, hopeful Padawan, high-fiving clones in the corridors of a Venator, which hits even harder when you remember where he is now. Alone, traumatized, and trying to rebuild. By the time you've wall run across some gaping chasm, high above the Roshir trees of Kashyyyk, you're not just thinking, cool, I made it. You're thinking, man, That was a piece of the old Cal coming back. In Metroidvania games, it's usually about the dopamine hit of revisiting old areas with shiny new abilities and finally cracking them open, satisfying for getting closer and closer to 100%ing each map. And sure, Fallen Order and Survivor give you just that. But they also layer it with some pretty deep narrative and thematic resonance. Take Bogano, one of the first planets you explore. Early on, it's a strange alien world that feels kind of overwhelming. But as you gain abilities, particularly the double jump late in the story, and revisit it, the planet starts to feel more manageable, like you're in control, not lost anymore. Leaping over gaps that you couldn't before, suddenly the whole map shrinks and you can cross it with ease. That mirrors Cal's personal growth perfectly. He's no longer running scared, he's learning to stand his ground, reclaiming his Jedi skills piece by piece. In fact, let's dig a little deeper into Bogano, because I think it's one of the best tutorial levels I've ever experienced. What makes Bogano stand out as a tutorial level is how it guides players without making them feel particularly constrained. The layout is carefully designed to funnel you toward key objectives, like the abandoned vault shining like a tall golden beacon on the horizon, without feeling linear. The planet feels open and inviting, encouraging you to stray off the beaten path while subtly teaching you the mechanics you'll rely on later. Even BD1 plays a role in this. His cheerful beeps and ability to scan objects provide hints without outright telling you what to do. I'm about to go on a tangent within a tangent, so bear with me, but BD1 as a companion is just so good for a video game. The way he hops off Cal's shoulder every now and then to point out key environmental details serves the dual role of helping navigation in a non-intrusive way, and gives the little droid so much personality. It's a great way to keep players engaged while offering just enough direction to prevent frustration. From the moment you set foot on Bogano, the level design plays with your curiosity. Treasure chests, glowing force echoes, and intriguing side paths beckon from just outside of reach. It's a subtle promise from the game. You'll be back here again. This design ties directly into the Metroidvania DNA of Fallen Order we were talking about in the last section. Early on you might spot a treasure chest sitting tantalizingly on an isolated island, or a locked door you can't open yet. At first it feels frustrating, but when you unlock double jump, force pull or other late game abilities, those seemingly impossible gaps suddenly become opportunities. The payoff for returning isn't just loot, it's the satisfaction of persistence and growth. By the time you revisit Bogano with your full toolkit, the planet feels transformed, not because it's changed, but because you have. It's a clever way to mirror Cal's journey as a Jedi, rediscovering his strength and potential. The planet is home to a variety of wildlife, from the harmless and adorable boglings to the territorial Bogdo, a notorious giant toad that makes for one of the game's first real challenges. These creatures make the world feel alive and encourage players to think strategically about combat. Beyond the wildlife, there are subtle storytelling touches scattered throughout. Take a detour, and you might stumble upon the remnants of an unlucky traveler who became lunch for the local fauna, or a hidden nook that offers a glimpse into the mysterious Eno Cordova's life in hiding. These moments reward exploration and give players a deeper sense of the galaxy's history. They also reinforce the game's theme of discovery, both external, in exploring the world, and internal, in Cal reconnecting with the Force. Perhaps the most important thing Bogano does is set the tone for the game. Its peaceful, mysterious atmosphere, enhanced by lush green landscapes, floating islands and ancient ruins, invites players to slow down and soak in the world. The planet is steeped in the Force, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. This sense of mystery is crucial. Bogano isn't just a tutorial, it's a prologue to Cal's journey. It introduces the stakes, the Zepho Vault and Cal's connection to the Jedi Order, the themes, growth, exploration and rediscovery, and the core gameplay loop: combat, traversal, exploration, puzzle solving, and, of course, backtracking. Lots and lots of backtracking. Bogano works because it strikes a perfect balance. It teaches without holding your hand, rewards curiosity without overwhelming you, and sets up the game's mechanics while immersing you in the story. The design encourages players to experiment, fail, and come back stronger, a philosophy that ties directly into both Metroidvania gameplay and Jedi teachings. It's a level that says, "Welcome to the galaxy. Now, go find your place in it." And by the time you leave Bogano, you're not just a better player, you're a Jedi in the making. Okay, with that detour out the way, let's get back to Fallen Order's wider level design philosophy. The game's world design does a ton of heavy lifting. Every planet feels like a character in its own right, brimming with secrets and stories, and the Metroidvania setup encourages you to explore, not just for loot or upgrades, but to understand the worlds you're traveling through. Again, this is all tied naturally into Cal's skill set. That's psychometry power, the Force echoes Cal can sense in objects to feel their history, allows the writers to add intimate little stories and environmental storytelling. What sets Fallen Order apart isn't just the implementation of Metroidvania mechanics. There are plenty of games that follow that well-worn mold. It's how those mechanics tie into Cal's struggle. At the start, every obstacle feels insurmountable. You don't have the tools, literally or emotionally, to push through. But every skill you unlock is a win, not just for the player, but for Cal. And it's not just about getting an ability. The game asks you to master it. That wall run you learned on Bogano, well, later levels will demand you chain it into jumps, force pulls, and precise timing. The challenges escalate, mirroring Cal's growth. It's not enough to gain strength. You have to learn how to use it wisely, just like a Jedi. For me, this approach lands because it feels authentic to Jedi's storytelling. The patience required, the frustration of failure when you mistime a jump, and the eventual triumph, all of it mirrors the Jedi journey. But does it always work? Well, the backtracking can sometimes feel like a bit of a slog if you're not into retracing steps, especially on planets where shortcuts aren't as intuitive. The map, while authentic of course, sometimes trades legibility for that authenticity. And occasionally, the narrative pacing slows down because the Metroidvania loop is doing its thing. But when it clicks, it really clicks. The combination of gameplay and story creates this unique blend where every skill, every unlock feels earned. You're not just playing through a Jedi story, you're living it, one ability and one hard-fought victory at a time. Survivor takes the expansive leap from the tightly designed Metroidvania-style maps of Fallen Order into something that flirts heavily with open-world sensibilities, particularly with its main planets Kobo and Jeddah. On the surface, this shift feels like a natural evolution, offering players an expansive galaxy to explore, but with this newfound freedom comes a trade-off. The sacrifice of the laser-focused level design that made its predecessor so memorable. For me, this trade-off undermines one of the core joys of the Metroidvania genre: exploration. What makes these games so satisfying isn't just the combat, but the thrill of puzzle solving and using newly acquired mechanics in innovative ways. The best Metroidvania experiences reward players for thinking outside the box, even allowing them to sequence break areas if they're clever enough to manipulate the game's systems. This sense of discovery, both in terms of uncovering secrets and mastering mechanics, is deeply tied to the gradual unlocking of abilities that serve dual purposes in both combat and exploration. For me, an ideal follow-up to Fallen Order would have retained its scope and focused more on adding variety to its puzzles and powers, something to make it more unique. By leaning into open-world sensibilities, Survivor sacrifices some of this intricate, emergent gameplay, favoring breadth over depth. Kobo is a centerpiece of Survivor's open-world ambitions, functioning as both a hub and a vast sprawling playground. It's a stunning, dense environment, filled with side quests, puzzles, enemy encounters, and collectibles. There's no denying the sense of wonder the planet evokes, with its rolling hills, underground caverns, and hidden ruins teeming with life. The planet itself feels alive. NPCs chatter about their lives, creatures roam freely, and the growing community of survivors Cal meets in the open world environment at Pyloon's Saloon gives you a sense of belonging to your growing community. But that scale can be a double-edged lightsaber. The breadth of Koboh often comes at the expense of the efficiently curated, purposeful level design that defined Fallen Order. Instead of guiding players seamlessly through interconnected environments with a clear sense of progression, Koboh sometimes overwhelms with sheer volume. It's easy to get sidetracked chasing down optional content, whether it's a bounty hunter mission, a new cosmetic item, or a tricky puzzle, and lose track of the main narrative thread. While this freedom is a hallmark of open world design, it occasionally creates friction in a game that still wants to tell a cohesive, emotionally resonant story, spreading those story beats just a little too far apart for my liking. In a game like Death Stranding, the story is the journey. Here, the journey is getting in the way too often and slows the pace unnaturally. Jeddah, while smaller and more narratively focused than Koboh, suffers from a similar problem. Its sprawling desert environment is visually striking and steeped in lore, but it also feels padded in places, with lengthy treks through barren terrain occasionally undermining the urgency of the story. The planet's design encourages exploration, but that same encouragement can sometimes slow the pace to a crawl, especially when traversal becomes a chore. For players who thrive on open-world exploration, Jeddah and Koboh are probably goldmines of content. They certainly offer dozens of hours of side activities. But for me, the constant pull toward distraction feels like a dilution of the experience. The core story occasionally struggles to assert itself amid the open-world chaos. The trade-off between focused design and open-world freedom is most apparent in the balance between story and side content. In Fallen Order, the level design and narrative were inextricably linked, with every new ability or traversal mechanic doubling as a moment of character growth for Cal. In Survivor, the story is often paused or sidelined for the sake of exploration. I appreciate that the Respawn team didn't take the easy route, resetting Cal's power level at the start of the sequel in order to reintroduce mechanics all over again. And there are a few small moments of learning, small flashbacks to moments with Cere, that flesh out Cal's force powers, like lift and slam, or the mind control ability. And it mostly makes sense. Cal is, after all, a much stronger Jedi in Survivor, compared with the young scrapper rat we met those years ago. But I can't help but miss the tightly wound narrative and gameplay hooks from Fallen Order. Those moments that drove Cal's personal growth and the scope of the player's toolkit simultaneously. Without those narrative hooks, the narrative urgency, whether it's Cal's pursuit of Tanalorr or the dangers posed by the Empire, feel diminished when you're spending hours tinkering with your saloon's minigame offerings. Although, I've got to say, I'd love a fleshed out version of the Holotactics game. That's not to say the side content is meaningless. Many of these diversions, like the NPCs you recruit to Pyloon's Saloon, or the hidden lore tucked away in ancient ruins, add richness to the world, but the sheer volume of content can make it hard to know what's essential and what's extraneous. For some players, I'm sure this abundance is a gift. For me, it's a hurdle that has introduced uncomfortable bloat. Both games offer high replay value, thanks to their ability-based exploration and hidden secrets, but the increased scale of Survivor makes revisiting every nook and cranny a daunting task. In Fallen Order, revisiting areas felt manageable and rewarding for me, thanks to the game's relatively concise maps. I find myself replaying Fallen Order semi-regularly. In Survivor, the sprawling size of Koboh and Jeddah makes retracing my sets feel like a slog, especially when fast travel points, a necessary addition this time out, due to the scale of these maps, aren't always conveniently placed. Ultimately, the expanded scope of Survivor is obviously ambitious, and it delivers an impressive sense of freedom and immersion on first contact. For fans who want to lose themselves in a massive Star Wars playground, it's probably a dream come true. But that ambition comes with growing pains that make it a lesser experience for me overall. The tight focus and seamless narrative integration that define Fallen Order are sacrificed in favor of sheer size. The Star Wars Jedi series takes one of the most iconic elements of the franchise,
the lightsaber, and builds its combat around a core gameplay loop similar to the precision-driven, rhythmic swordplay of Sekiro. By embracing this blueprint, Fallen Order and Survivor successfully deliver intense and cinematic lightsaber duels, filled with parries, deflections, and counters that perfectly align with the elegance and brutality of Jedi combat seen in the films. However, while the combat excels in many areas, it stumbles slightly in its implementation of certain mechanics, particularly the posture system, leaving room for improvement in how it captures the visceral finality of lightsaber duels.
This will only take a moment.
At its core, the Jedi series' lightsaber combat draws clear inspiration from Sekiro's parry-heavy, rhythm-driven swordplay. This choice feels like a natural fit here. The prequel trilogy's lightsaber duels, choreographed masterpieces like Obi-Wan vs. Anakin on Mustafar, or Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan vs. Darth Maul, are defined by their rhythmic back-and-forth clashes, where a single mistake can lead to a fatal blow. By adopting Sekiro's framework, the Jedi games aim to recreate that cinematic energy, turning every encounter into a deadly dance of precision and timing. Where Sekiro uses a posture system to determine the flow of combat, Jedi replaces the traditional Souls-like stamina mechanics with a similar structure. Enemies and players have a posture meter, which breaks when pressure is applied through sustained attacks or perfectly timed parries. Breaking an enemy's guard creates an opening for a free, devastating attack. The result? Duels that feel authentic to the Star Wars mythos, rewarding timing and skill where staying true to the idea that lightsaber combat is as much about finesse as it is about power, at least in theory. My feelings on this combat framework are a little more mixed than my outright love of Sekiro's own. First, let's talk about the basics. Deflecting blaster bolts is an immediate power trip. There's nothing quite like perfectly timing your parries to send scarlet bolts straight back at stormtroopers, taking them down one by one. It's effortless, it's cool, and it makes you feel like a Jedi Master in a way no other mechanic could. The real meat of the combat system is, of course, those duels. Going up against elite enemies like Purge Troopers, KX droids, or even Inquisitors feels like a deadly showdown every single time. These fights demand your full attention. You've got to read your opponent, time your parries, and know when to dodge or to go on the offense. On the higher difficulties, they hit hard and they hit fast. Every clash of blades feels weighty and deliberate, giving each duel a sense of danger and excitement. The sparks flying from every clash, the hum of the sabers, the crunch of a perfect finishing blow. It's pure Star Wars. The sound design and animations work together to deliver that visceral thrill, and it makes every fight satisfying, no matter how small. One quirk of this system that makes it just that little bit less responsive than Sekiro's system is the lack of animation cancelling on the startup frames of an attack. Once you press the button and start an attack, you're locked into that attack, come what may. Part of what makes Sekiro feel as responsive as it does, and what imparts that feeling of a true sword duel, is being able to react instantly to enemy counterattacks, giving it that signature back and forth feel. Oddly, this feature was added to Survivor, but only in dual stance. As a result, it ends up feeling more responsive than the others. While we're on the subject of stances, let's take a little bit of a closer look, because they're one of the elements that provides quite a bit more depth than the simple controls would lead you to suspect. With 2 distinct saber stances, and up to 5 in Survivor, each designed to excel in different scenarios, the games give you the tools to tailor your combat style to your preferred Jedi vibe. Whether you're cutting down waves of enemies, or dueling a deadly boss, every stance offers strengths, weaknesses, and a tangible impact on gameplay. The single blade stance is the most classic and versatile, offering a well-rounded experience that balances speed, power, and defense. It's the perfect choice for players who enjoy one-on-one duels or need a reliable approach in most situations. This stance feels quintessentially Jedi, whether you're deflecting blaster bolts or engaging in intense saber clashes. However, its versatility comes with limits. When surrounded by enemies, the single blade can start to feel inadequate compared to stances built for crowd control. That's where the double-bladed stance shines. Channeling the energy of Darth Maul, this stance is tailor-made for handling groups of enemies. Its sweeping strikes and incredible block stamina make it the ultimate crowd control option, especially when deflecting a barrage of incoming blaster fire. It excels at keeping hordes of stormtroopers or droids at bay, making it an essential part of your arsenal. However, its lack of raw power can make it feel underwhelming in boss fights or against tougher single opponents. For players like me, who prefer speed and aggression, the dual-wield stance introduced in Survivor is an adrenaline rush. With its lightning-fast strikes, this stance allows you to overwhelm enemies with relentless combos and rapid attacks. It also features a unique parry system, letting you turn defense into a deadly counterattack. However, this aggressive stance comes with a cost. Dual-wield has an incredibly low block stamina, leaving you vulnerable if you can't keep up the pressure. It's the perfect stance for players who like to live on the edge. High risk, high reward. As I say, it's probably my favorite stance added in Survivor and makes the basic combat loop feel great. If raw power is more your thing though, the crossguard stance is all about heavy hitting, Kylo Ren style combat. Every swing of this saber feels weighty, with the potential to stagger enemies or deal massive damage to heavily armored foes. This stance rewards precision and timing, and heavily punishes button mashing, as I learned the hard way, as each strike feels like a deliberate, earth-shattering blow. That power comes at the expense of speed. The crossguard stance is incredibly slow, and a missed swing can leave you wide open, making it better suited for calculated players who don't mind trading agility for raw strength. Finally, there's the blaster and saber stance, which brings a fresh mix of ranged and melee combat. This hybrid style allows for a dynamic hit-and-run approach, making it a fantastic choice for players who value that versatility. Picking off enemies at a distance with the blaster feels satisfying, and you can seamlessly close the gap with the saber for close quarters attacks. That said, the stance does come with limitations. The saber itself is less powerful than other options, and the blaster's limited energy requires you to recharge it through melee hits. It feels a lot like Hyper Light Drifter's combat system in that way. Still, it's an exciting addition that feels completely unique within the Jedi games. Each stance is finely tuned for specific combat scenarios, and the ability to swap between them on the fly is a game changer. The single blade excels in balanced duels and versatility, while the double blade stance holds the line against crowds. Dual wield lets you play fast and loose with the aggressive offense, and the crossguard is perfect for smashing through tough enemies. Despite all these strengths of the system, the posture system in the Jedi series doesn't quite land as effectively as Sekiro's. In Sekiro, the posture gauge is tied to the game's death blow mechanic. A perfectly executed sequence of deflections, attacks, and counters can lead to a cinematic kill, regardless of the enemy's health. This gives combat a high-stakes push and pull dynamic, where players feel rewarded for skillfully breaking an opponent's guard. The finality of the death blow system is part of what makes Sekiro's duels so memorable. In Fallen Order and Survivor, the posture system feels less impactful. Breaking an enemy's guard creates an opening, but it doesn't carry the same weight as Sekiro's death blow mechanic. Posture can be broken quickly, and enemies recover it even quicker, meaning the process often needs to be repeated multiple times to defeat them, even for tougher duelist enemies. This repetitive cycle dilutes the sense of triumph that should accompany breaking an opponent's guard, especially in longer fights. This is particularly noticeable in the context of Star Wars' cinematic lightsaber duels, where one well-placed strike is often the difference between life and death. Imagine a Jedi combat system where a broken posture meter led directly to a devastating cinematic animation, a single decisive strike mirroring the final moments of duels like Obi-Wan vs. Maul or Luke vs. Vader. Such a system would not only align better with Star Wars' iconic dueling style, but also make combat feel more impactful and rewarding. Overall, the Jedi series delivers lightsaber combat that is cinematic, skill-based, and deeply satisfying, when it works. The rhythmic parry, focused swordplay captures the essence of Jedi dueling, blending the elegance of Star Wars' iconic choreography with the addictive precision of a Sekiro-style combat framework. It's a combat system that excels at making players feel like a Jedi, from deflecting blaster bolts to dismantling purge troopers in high-stakes duels. Yet, the posture system holds it back from achieving true greatness. By failing to embrace the finality and drama of a mechanic like Sekiro's death blows, the Jedi games miss an opportunity to make lightsaber combat even more impactful and true to the spirit of Star Wars. Still, the foundation is strong, and with a few refinements, such as a reimagined posture system or more decisive finishing mechanics, the Jedi series could take its combat from great to legendary. The Jedi games have consistently delivered some of the most enjoyable and cinematic boss encounters in my recent gaming career. From intense saber duels to massive creature clashes, they offer battles that are both mechanically satisfying and thematically rich. Let's break down a few standout moments. Masana Tide serves as Cal's first real duel in Fallen Order. At that point, she's a brutal, towering threat. Cal survives more through grit and luck than anything else. Having climbed to the highest point on Kashyyyk, with the help of the stunning Shio bird, the Ninth Sister ambushes Cal, as she has throughout the level. Where before you were sliding down muddy banks to avoid the blaster fire from the TIE Reaper, now she faces you in person. Her attacks are so much more aggressive than most anything you've fought in the game to that point, fittingly so. Huge arcing blows, unblockable saber spinning, and powerful charges. She's a handful to fight, stretching all those skills you've developed so far. On my first playthrough, I had only just acquired the double-bladed saber, and hadn't developed any skills related to that stance, which made her especially tough. As I say, Cal survives that fight more with luck than skill, managing to honor that age-old Star Wars tradition, arm dismemberment during saber duels. But fast forward to Survivor, and the Ninth Sister's role shifts completely. She becomes a tutorial boss. What was once a dangerous adversary is now just an early test of Cal's skills. The fight brilliantly showcases how far Cal has come. He's stronger, more confident, and more capable, not just in skill, but in his mindset. His calm, collected demeanor as he strikes her down reflects his maturity growth. He doesn't kill her out of anger or hate, but with a quiet decisiveness, honoring what she once was as a Jedi. It's a great narrative and mechanical moment that sets the stage for Survivor's more mature Cal. Taran is a fascinating, if slightly underexplored character. Thematically, he serves as another little mirror to Cal, a Jedi who has also suffered after Order 66. Like Cal, Malicos survived betrayal and crash-landed on an unfamiliar world, but where Cal holds onto the light. Malicos leaned into the dark side to survive on Dathomir, a hostile, brutal place where strength rules above all else. This dynamic is heavily influenced by the Clone Wars TV show. We've seen the Dathomirian tribes of Savage oppress and more, where power means survival. Malicos loses himself to that power, and it drives him mad. He's a fallen Jedi corrupted by the need to dominate. The fight itself is fantastic. It demands the full range of Cal's skills, and even then, it's clear Cal is outmatched without Merrin's help. Her dark magic keeps Malicos off balance, and their teamwork is crucial to victory. One small note here, I think the Jedi games could benefit from more boss fights like this. Fights that really push the player to use both the offensive and defensive powers of being a Jedi. Stormtroopers are fun to mow through for a while, but these challenging cinematic duels are where the game shines brightest. Survivor's inclusion of lightsaber-wielding Bedlam Raider mini-bosses doesn't make a lot of sense narratively to me, but I do love them mechanically. The clashing of sabers is always great, and their inclusion of bounty hunter-style trickery and grappling cable is a really fun distinct characteristic of their fighting style that makes sense as a leveler against force-using opponents. As I hope should be pretty obvious from my pretty detailed exploration of her character, Trilla is easily the most narratively compelling villain across both games for me. She's a powerful exploration of pain, trauma, and the divergent paths that loss can lead us down. Mechanically, the Trilla fights are awesome too. Saber boss fights are at their best when they capture the energy of the films, those clashing blades, desperate parries, and dynamic movement. Trilla delivers all that and more. What's especially great is how her moveset evolves over the game. Each time you face her, she respects Cal's skill a little bit more, and it shows. Early fights feature straightforward saber swings and taunts, baiting you into mistakes. By the final fight, she's a whirlwind of unblockable grabs, force waves, and relentless aggression. The last duel in the Fortress Inquisitorius is peak cinematic gameplay. An intense test of everything you've learned and a showcase of Jedi Fallen Order's incredible combat design in all its glory. One thing the Jedi games do pretty well is throwing in unexpected, cinematic creature encounters alongside traditional saber duels. The bat creature on Dathomir is a standout because it feels so different. The fight itself is intense. This massive creature's wings send Cal flying like a ragdoll, forcing you to stay nimble and strike only when it's vulnerable. And narratively, it does something pretty clever too. When you've done damage to the bat does what real animals do. It flees. For a moment, you think the fight is over. You even get a reward, an upgrade to your climbing gear, reinforcing that sense of victory. Then, as you climb, it ambushes you again. This second phase ups the stakes dramatically. You're vulnerable, climbing to escape, and the creature re-engages mid-air. What follows is an epic aerial clash as you freefall, slamming into rock formations and hacking at its claws. It's dynamic, heart-racing, and unlike anything else in the game. The encounter ends with both Cal and the creature plummeting toward the earth. Cinematic, thrilling, and completely unique within the game's boss roster. The Star Wars Jedi series is a modern exploration of the themes, legacy, and aesthetics that define the Star Wars franchise. By blending Cal Kestis' personal journey with the broader struggles of the galaxy, these games offer a fresh perspective on Star Wars' enduring traditions while carving out their own unique narrative identity. At its core, the Star Wars saga, the main 9 films at least, are a story about redemption. From Anakin Skywalker's tragic fall, to Luke's unshakable belief in his father's innate goodness, and then Han's and Rey's faith in Ben Solo, the saga has always emphasized that no one is beyond saving. These themes resonate deeply in Fallen Order and Survivor, where Cal's struggles mirror the moral dilemmas faced by the Jedi before him. As we've explored throughout this video so far, Cal's journey is a meditation on trauma, resilience, and the importance of choosing hope over despair. Like many Jedi before him, he grapples with the weight of his past. Order 66, the death of his master, and the galaxy's descent into darkness. Fallen Order frames his growth as a reclamation of his identity as a Jedi, while Survivor challenges him to balance his growing power with the Jedi ideals of selflessness and restraint. The games excel in depicting how the Force is more than a tool. It's a moral compass. Cal's choices, whether to embrace his anger or seek a better path, place him within Star Wars' thematic framework while pushing it forward in interesting ways. His connection to characters like Trilla and Bode further explores the cost of succumbing to fear and the redemptive power of understanding, even if the game sometimes falls short of fully developing these relationships. At its heart, the Star Wars saga has always been a deeply human tale, driven by the mysticism and moral philosophy of the Force. George Lucas designed the Force as a universal metaphor, a bridge between ancient spiritual traditions and contemporary struggles. It is a lens through which we can examine themes of selflessness and selfishness, hope and fear, and the enduring battle between light and darkness that resides within all of us.
You got the dark side, the light side. One is selfless, one is selfish. And you want to keep them in balance. What happens when you go to the dark side is it goes out of balance, and then you get really selfish and you forget about everybody. And you.
The Force, as envisioned originally by Lucas, is an amalgamation of spiritual ideas drawn from nature-worshipping traditions, Eastern philosophies, and psychological archetypes. It is the connective tissue of the galaxy, an energy field created by all living things that binds and sustains life.
Makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us.
The Jedi understand it as a guide to their destiny and a source of balance that needs to be protected. The Jedi mantra encapsulates their philosophical principles. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. The Sith, on the other hand, see it as a means to power and control. The Sith mantra is an interesting inversion of the Jedi's, reusing much of the same language, but where the Jedi reject passion and emotion in favor of peace and serenity, trusting in the balance of the Force, the Sith seek personal satisfaction and always ambition.
Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion I gain strength. Through strength I gain power. Through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken. The Force shall set me free.
I think it's valuable up front to think about the Jedi Order in the same way that you classify, say, Christianity as a religious group. Followers of Christian teachings hold certain beliefs as core and fundamental parts of who they are and how they choose to live their lives. You may not personally buy into the same beliefs, but it's important to recognize that they absolutely do. Sticking with Christianity as the example, the Ten Commandments are a framework for living a devout life if you believe in the teachings of Christ. The Jedi philosophy, summed up the mantra we've just read, emphasizes discipline, compassion, and the rejection of personal desire. For the Jedi, the light side of the Force is not a path to power. It's a way of life, a commitment to serving others and maintaining balance and harmony in the galaxy. Compassion and love are encouraged, but attachment and possessiveness are forbidden, because through that attachment, one is less likely to be able to put aside one's selfish desires for the greater good. This distinction is critical. The Jedi recognize that attachment leads to fear. Fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of change. These fears can spiral into anger, hate, and suffering. The Jedi's selflessness lies in their ability to let go, trusting the Force to guide them and embracing the idea that life, like the Force, is cyclical. Death is not an end, but a reconnection to the Force, a return to the source of all life. In that way, the Jedi are reflections of many real-world religions. The concept of an afterlife is something mankind has meditated on and created as a way of respecting and honoring those that have passed on. We make time to grieve and reflect on life. The Jedi philosophy offers a unique lens on death and the afterlife. blending spiritual concepts found in many real-world religions with the rich mythology of the Star Wars universe built on top. At its core is the idea that life and death are part of a larger, interconnected cycle. Death isn't an end, it's a transformation, a return to the Force. This belief shapes how the Jedi perceive loss, grief, and their place in the galaxy.
Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter.
When a Jedi dies, they don't see it as a tragedy, necessarily, but as a return to this greater energy. This idea mirrors the cycles found in many Earth religions and philosophies. The Jedi belief in returning to the Force echoes the Buddhist concept of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The ultimate goal is not fear or attachment to life, but acceptance and enlightenment. Similarly, the notion of becoming one with the Force parallels Hindu ideas of the Atman, merging with Brahman. The Jedi reverence for the dead, their belief in the persistence of the spirit, and the idea of being one with the Force find echoes in the afterlife teachings of Christianity and Islam, where the soul continues after physical death. The afterlife, or heaven in our world. The Jedi teachings don't dismiss grief or the pain of loss. Instead, they emphasize acceptance and honoring the legacy of those who have passed. The Jedi view grief as a natural emotion, but one that must not consume them. This perspective finds its clearest expression in how the Jedi remember their fallen. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant contained places of reflection and remembrance, where fallen Jedi were honored. These memorials were not just for mourning, but for celebrating the lives and contributions of those who had now returned to the Force. Jedi are encouraged to honor their predecessors by carrying on their teachings. Yoda's lessons live on through Luke, just as Obi-Wan carries Qui-Gon's ideals forward. The legacy of the Jedi is a living thing, passed down through generations.
1,000 generations live in you now.
The Jedi are one of the most debated institutions in the Star Wars universe. They're often criticized for various aspects of their philosophy and practices. Chief among them, the accusation that they take children from their families and monopolize access to the Force. But let's take a closer look at these criticisms and try and reframe the conversation to more easily understand why this makes a ton of sense. To understand the Jedi, we need to recognize what they truly represent. In essence, Force-sensitive beings in the Star Wars galaxy are akin to superheroes. They possess extraordinary abilities, telekinesis, enhanced speed and strength, mind control, precognitive reflexes. Think Jean Grey or Professor X, combined with the reflexes of someone like Quicksilver. But as Star Wars consistently shows us, with great power comes great temptation. The dark side is ever present, offering these gifted individuals a path to selfish gain and domination. A single Force user falling to the darkness can wreak unimaginable destruction. Multiply that by thousands, and what you get is the Sith Empire and the galaxy-spanning wars of the Old Republic. The Jedi see it as their moral obligation to try and prevent this. They don't monopolize the Force out of a sense of selfishness or elitism. They train Force-sensitive individuals to ensure these powers are used responsibly. Without their guidance, the galaxy risks becoming a battleground for unchecked supervillains. One of the most persistent criticisms of the Jedi is their practice of identifying Force-sensitive children and inducting them into the Order at a young age. I've seen plenty of online critics argue this is cruel and robs these children of a normal life. But this criticism, I think, misunderstands the stakes. The Jedi aren't simply training children to follow orders, they're teaching them discipline, self-awareness and balance. They believe that emotional attachments, while not inherently bad, can make a Force user vulnerable to the dark side.
Fear of loss is a path to the dark side.
They believe that they can instill this discipline before children can consciously form those emotional connections that would likely override their sense of moral duty to the greater good. And ultimately, we also see that individuals can refuse the Jedi and walk away. They're not prisoners. Anakin's inability to let go of his attachment drives his fall to the dark side. His love for his mother and Padme becomes a destructive obsession with growing in power to prevent death.
I promise you, I will even learn to stop people from dying.
When he loses his mother to the Tuscans, he succumbs to rage, slaughtering a whole village. When he fears losing Padme, he is manipulated into betraying everything he stood for, believing he can save her. His attachments consume him, leading to the rise of Darth Vader and the fall of the Jedi Order. Even Luke, the hero of the original trilogy, struggles with this risk of attachment. His bond with his friends causes him to abandon his training on Dagobah prematurely, leading to a reckless confrontation with Vader on Cloud City. He nearly dies, and risks losing everything, because he acts on emotion rather than wisdom.
And sacrifice Han and Leia.
If you honor what they fight for, yes.
The Jedi Code is not about suppressing emotion or denying humanity. It's about accepting loss and finding peace, so that power doesn't become a tool for destruction. Obi-Wan Kenobi serves as the prototypical Jedi, embodying their ideals of balance and discipline. Throughout his journey, he faced tremendous loss and grief, but he never lets his emotions drive him to the dark side. When Obi-Wan's master Qui-Gon is killed by Darth Maul and Naboo, he's clearly devastated, yet he doesn't let his grief overwhelm him. Instead, he channels his emotions into action, defeating Maul and resolving to honor Qui-Gon's legacy by training Anakin. Obi-Wan's relationship with Satine, implied to be romantic in the Clone Wars, is a fascinating study in that emotional discipline. When Satine is murdered by Maul, Obi-Wan grieves deeply, but he doesn't seek vengeance. He accepts her loss and remains steadfast in his commitment to the Jedi path. Perhaps Obi-Wan's greatest tragedy is watching Anakin, the brother he loved, succumb to the dark side. Even then, Obi-Wan doesn't give in to hatred or revenge. He fights Anakin out of necessity and duty, not anger, and ultimately walks away from their duel heartbroken, but resolute that he has done the right thing. Through Obi-Wan, we see that Jedi teachings don't demand emotional suppression. They encourage balance, to feel emotions, but not be ruled by them, to accept loss and find peace. Critics often portray the Jedi as cold, detached, or overly rigid, but their philosophy is rooted in something real. Power without control is a danger to everyone. By training young Force sensitives, the Jedi aren't robbing them of a normal life. They're giving them the tools to handle their immense power responsibly. The galaxy without the Jedi is a galaxy in chaos. The Sith Empire, the Galactic Empire, and the wars that follow show us the consequences of untrained or corrupted Force users. The Jedi Order may not be perfect, but their mission, to maintain peace and balance across the galaxy, is a vital one. If the light side represents discipline and joy, the dark side is its seductive counterpart, a path of selfishness, greed, and temporary satisfaction.
The dark side is pleasure, biological, and temporary, and easy to achieve. The light side is joy, everlasting, and difficult to achieve.
The dark side preys on fear and desire, exploiting the fundamental human inclination to avoid pain and seek pleasure.
But the pleasure factor of greed and of selfishness is a short-lived experience. Therefore, you're constantly trying to replenish it. But of course, the more you replenish it, the harder it is to you have to keep up again.
George Lucas often compared the dark side to addiction. It offers immediate power and gratification, but leaves its users hollow and unsatisfied. The more one indulges in the dark side, the greater their hunger becomes, leading to a cycle of insatiable greed and destructive anger. The dark side of the Force is one of Star Wars' most enduring and evocative concepts, but it's often misunderstood. Some interpretations, sometimes even within Star Wars' own extended media, like The Acolyte or the sequel trilogy, suggest that the dark side represents just negative emotions, anger, sadness, fear, and that achieving balance involves embracing both light and dark within ourselves. While this makes for an intriguing philosophical angle in its own right, it misses the deeper allegory that George Lucas embedded in the saga. The capital letters dark side is not merely about feeling emotions. It is addiction. It is fixation. And like addiction, it is the consuming force that twists and destroys the person it ensnares. Yoda's warning in The Empire Strikes Back perfectly encapsulates this.
Start down the dark path forever. Will it dominate your destiny, consume you it will?
This isn't just a caution against feelings of anger or fear occasionally, but a profound metaphor for the insidious nature of addiction. Consider for a moment how addiction takes hold in the real world. At first, it's alluring, offering pleasure, escape, or relief from pain. For a smoker, the first few cigarettes might bring stress relief. For an alcoholic, a few drinks might create feelings of euphoria or numbness. But over time, that pleasure diminishes. The high becomes harder to sustain, and the addiction takes more and more from the person while giving less in return. Life beyond the addiction becomes dull, grey, and mundane. Eventually, the addiction consumes the person entirely, leaving them a shell of who they once were, often distanced from friends and family. And this is precisely what the dark side does in Star Wars. It offers power, control, and exhilaration in the beginning, tempting its users with promises of quick solutions and unrestrained freedom. What makes the dark side so compelling as an allegory is that, like addiction, it preys on vulnerability. The Jedi teach discipline, mindfulness, and detachment, not because emotions themselves are bad, but because unchecked emotions can make one susceptible to fixation. Fear, anger, and even hatred aren't inherently evil, but when fixated upon, when they become an obsession, they become all-consuming. The Jedi fear the dark side, not because they believe in repressing emotions, but because they understand how easily power can corrupt, and how even a single step into the darkness can lead to ruin, particularly in a universe where people are swinging lightsabers and force-choking people across the galaxy. This allegory also highlights why the idea of balancing light and dark within oneself doesn't really align with Lucas's vision. You don't balance addiction by indulging it alongside sobriety. Addiction is a spiral, pulling the person deeper and deeper into its grasp. Similarly, the dark side is not about embracing one's anger in harmony with compassion. It's about being overtaken by that anger, allowing it to define and dominate one's actions. True balance, as the Jedi understand it, comes from mastery over the self, not denial of emotion, but awareness and control. The real tragedy of the dark side lies in its deceptive allure. Like addiction, it promises so much, but takes even more. It isolates its victims, leaving them hollow and disconnected. By the time Darth Vader faces his son in Return of the Jedi, he's an emotional void, living only in service to the Emperor, fueled by decades of hatred and regret. Yet, even in the depths of addiction, there is hope for redemption. I think that's the power of Star Wars, really. Vader's ultimate sacrifice, rejecting the dark side to save Luke, is a moment of clarity and choice, showing that while addiction can dominate a person's destiny, it does not have to define it forever. Darth Vader's redemption in Return of the Jedi is one of the most powerful moments in cinematic history for me, because it captures a powerful emotional resonance so well. After decades of guilt and self-loathing, Vader, once that little boy from Tatooine who knew nothing of greed, finds the strength to rise above his addiction for the love of his son. It's not just a rejection of the Emperor, but a reclamation of himself. In saving Luke, Vader takes control of his destiny for the first time in decades. It's an act of love and profound courage. He knows it will cost him his life, but he willingly pays that price because, for the first time in so long, he sees the right path clearly. This one act doesn't erase the horrors Vader has committed, of course. Redemption isn't about undoing the past in a single act. It's about choosing a better future, even if it's only for a fleeting moment. Vader's choice to save Luke is that first, impossibly hard step. The moment when Anakin reclaims his agency and identity from the darkness that has consumed him. His journey mirrors that reality of recovery from addiction. A long, grueling process filled with setbacks and tests, but one that begins with a single moment of clarity. A recognition that something needs to change. So this video isn't about the sequel trilogy, and I don't want to get too derailed in tangents, but bear with me for a moment. Anakin's redemption could have been the springboard for a deeper exploration of forgiveness and the struggles that come with it. While Luke's belief in his father's capacity for good is a cornerstone of Return of the Jedi, the larger ramifications of Vader's redemption are left largely unexplored in the original trilogy. Luke's faith in the light and the possibility of redemption is unwavering. But what about Leia? For a follow-up to Episode 6, a theoretical Episode 7, let's say, Leia's perspective could have been a powerful lens through which to explore the complexities of familial forgiveness and the burden of legacy. Unlike Luke, during the original trilogy, Leia wasn't fighting for Anakin's soul. She was battling Vader, and the wider empire he represents, the man who tortured her, destroyed Alderaan, and killed the family who raised her. Discovering that this monster is her biological father is, presumably, an identity-shattering revelation, one ripe with emotional and narrative potential. A revelation that the original trilogy didn't have the time, or maybe even the inclination to explore. Imagine Leia grappling with the knowledge that her biological father was Darth Vader. She's a leader in the founding of the New Republic, working tirelessly to restore democracy and justice across hundreds of worlds following the plague of the Empire. Her entire life has been defined by fighting against tyranny, and now, she's got to reconcile that with her own lineage, while starting an entire galactic-scale governmental democracy. This time, not with blasters and X-Wings, but by convincing those that benefited from the systems of the Empire to embrace said democracy. The idea that Vader could be forgiven, that Anakin could be redeemed, might feel impossible to her, not because she's cold or unfeeling, but because her trauma is so profound. Leia's arc could have explored the idea that forgiveness is not a familial obligation, it's a process, deeply personal and often incredibly difficult. She might struggle to see past Vader's atrocities, even as she admires Luke's capacity for compassion and hope. This tension between siblings could have been a fascinating dynamic. Luke, the Jedi, believing in redemption as a fundamental principle of the Force, and Leia, the pragmatist, unable to see how forgiveness serves the greater good. Combine that with Leia's role as a mother. The seismic upheaval of learning her parentage, coupled with her own responsibility to rebuild a galaxy, could make her struggle to raise Ben Solo feel deeply human and relatable. With Han, a man whose charm and bravery are often offset by his own insecurities and shortcomings throughout the original trilogy, Leia might find her emotions stretched thin. Perhaps she worries about the legacy of Vader's bloodline, or wrestles with feelings of inadequacy in the face of Luke's seemingly untouchable moral certainty. These personal battles could have added depth to her relationship with Han and Ben, highlighting the challenges of their love in a galaxy still healing from war. Raising a child is already a full-time job, all-consuming and hard. Combine that with her commitment to the galaxy she has just saved. It'd be pretty easy to imagine a struggling mother who feels she's failing to be that mother her young son needs. Beyond these normal struggles of a working parent, Ben is also a Force user, a potential superhero in the Star Wars universe, something that Leia can't really connect to or relate with. Giving her son to Luke muddies family and philosophical boundaries in ways that I could imagine would be interesting for a story to explore. Luke's distance as he works to establish a new Jedi Order could create further strain. Leia might resent his detachment and his devotion to an order she views as partially complicit in the Republic's fall. This tension could reflect real-world family dynamics, where siblings clash over politics, differing values and responsibilities. Perhaps Leia believes the Jedi need to evolve, to sever their ties to the past, while Luke clings to the ancient traditions, trying to uphold Yoda and Obi-Wan's legacy. Families touched by addiction, trauma and loss often find themselves on diverging paths, struggling to understand one another while navigating their own pain. Leia's arc could have mirrored the long, hard road of recovery, forgiveness and healing, not just for Anakin, but for the galaxy itself. And yes, what I'm pitching here is a small-scale and pretty grim story about grief and the impact of family trauma, over the bombastic action spectacle we ultimately got in the sequels. Can you tell that I happen to love Haunting of Hill House? While the sequel trilogy definitely touches on some of these ideas, and a few of the books and other media that have been released in recent years have done similar things, I think it's a real shame that the opportunity to delve deeper into Leia's emotional landscape on the big screen was largely missed. There was potential for a story of love and pain and resilience that felt deeply personal, while remaining true to the grand operatic scale of Star Wars. Leia deserved that exploration, and audiences deserve to see her journey toward reconciliation with her brother, with her father's legacy, and her own heritage. When I told Fox the next film is about how Darth Vader got to be Darth Vader, they got all excited. I told them, in the first movie, he's 10 years old. Fox, and also people at Lucasfilm, said, "You're going to destroy the franchise. You're going to destroy everything. You can't do it. This is terrible." Everyone was upset, and I thought, this is why I own the films. And I own the company. Because if I didn't, this film would never get made. If I went to a studio with this story, it would never have existed. I know everybody wants to see Darth Vader in his black suit with his lightsaber, but the whole point of it is, how does this nice little kind kid, who has good intentions, is just like us, go wrong and became Darth Vader? And the second part of the story is, how does a democracy become a dictatorship? The Star Wars prequels are often critiqued for their execution, but at their core, they tell a tragedy of remarkable depth and set the scene for much of the Star Wars lore central to the original trilogy. At the center of this story lies Anakin Skywalker, a child of extraordinary potential who becomes the galaxy's most feared villain. Through themes of loss, manipulation, and unchecked power, the prequels craft a compelling narrative of one man's fall and the fragility of institutions in the face of their own hubris and bad faith actors. To understand Cal's journey to becoming the prototypical Jedi, we have to acknowledge the level of temptation he must have faced. And to do that, there is no greater example of a fall from grace than Vader's. One of my favorite scenes in Revenge of the Sith is an early one, Anakin seeking counsel from Yoda. He has been tormented by visions of Padme's death, consumed by fear and desperation. Yoda's response is steeped in Jedi philosophy.
Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force.
This advice is, in essence, correct within the Jedi worldview and religious belief. The Jedi believe in detachment, not as a denial of love, but as a way to rise above selfish desire and fear. It even echoes the words of his mother, Shmi, in The Phantom Menace.
Stop the change, any more than you can stop the suns from setting.
To Anakin, who is haunted by guilt over his failure to save his mother from slavery and death at the hands of the primitive Tuskens, Yoda's words are cold comfort. His promise to his mother from The Phantom Menace can never be fulfilled. And it does haunt him. He cannot accept loss as a natural part of life, and his fear of losing Padme drives him to a desperate quest for control, no matter the cost. I think this tension reveals the tragedy at the heart of the prequels, one that's often missed. Anakin's emotions make him deeply human, and his refusal to let go is something we as the audience can understand, I think. His love for Padme and desire to protect her feels noble, yet these same emotions become his undoing. His unconditional love becomes obsession and possession. His fear of loss becomes the crack through which Palpatine slips, exploiting Anakin's vulnerability and steering him toward the dark side. In contrast to the Jedi's cold detachment, Palpatine offers Anakin understanding and validation. He strokes Anakin's ego, feeds his frustrations with the Council, and promises him the power to save Padme. Anakin's trust in Palpatine isn't born out of ignorance, it stems from desperation. The Jedi who have kept him at arm's length since his childhood deny him the rank of master, and chastise him for his emotions. Palpatine, on the other hand, positions himself as the only person who truly sees Anakin's potential and respects his feelings.
I know there are things about the Force that they're not telling me.
Yet, even when Anakin learns the horrifying truth that Palpatine is the Sith Lord manipulating the galactic conflict in which he's fought for so long, he initially does the right thing. He goes to Mace Windu, a Jedi who has treated him perhaps the most harshly through the prequels, and reveals Palpatine's deceit. Windu's response must cut deeply. After years of fighting the Jedi's wars, losing his mother due to their teachings, and hiding his love to adhere to their code, Anakin still hasn't earned their trust. Still, he obeys them, trying desperately to follow their path. His internal conflict through Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith is a crisis of faith. He struggles to live the doctrine that has been imparted as unquestionable truth since his boyhood. This internal conflict culminates in one of the saga's most haunting moments. Standing alone, looking across Coruscant, Anakin reaches out through the Force and feels Padme's presence. He knows she will die without Palpatine's help, and he knows the Jedi are taking away his only chance to save her. Tears fall as the weight of his choice crushes him. When he arrives to find Mace Windu confronting Palpatine, Anakin begs Windu to take the Sith Lord alive. But when Mace moves to execute Palpatine, violating the Jedi's principles, Anakin reacts, perhaps instinctively. He ignites his lightsaber, cutting off Mace's hand, and allows Palpatine to strike the killing blow. Immediately, though, Anakin collapses, overcome with regret. But by then his choice is made. He kneels before Palpatine, not out of loyalty but desperation. His plea is heart-wrenching. Anakin's turn to the dark side is not a commitment to the Sith. It's a commitment to Padme. From that moment on, every action he takes, the slaughter of the Jedi at the Temple, the massacre of the Separatist leaders on Mustafar, is in service of that singular goal. His actions are extreme, but should be fairly understandable. His choice, as he sees it, is to either continue serving the Jedi, which has brought nothing but suffering, or fuel himself with the dark side to grow in power and hopefully save Padme. Palpatine tells him that only by killing the Jedi will he become powerful enough to prevent her death. This is what he has been missing. This is why he couldn't save his mother. This is what the Jedi had been keeping from him. And he can single-handedly end the war that has consumed so much of his life. He can bring peace, freedom, justice, and security to the galaxy. It is the ultimate corruption of the small boy that knew nothing of greed, only thinking to help others without any thought of reward. As we know by its nature, the dark side, seductive and corrupting, consumes him. The more Anakin indulges in its power, the more he loses himself to hatred, anger, and self-loathing. He hates everything he's been doing. He feels guilt, shame. By the time he reunites with Padme on Mustafar, he is desperate to justify his actions. He tries to convince her that all his sins, the atrocities he now despises about himself, will be worth it if they can rule the galaxy together. But Padme, horrified by what he's become, rejects him. Her rejection is the final breaking point. When Anakin sees Obi-Wan emerge from her ship, his mind twists her actions into betrayal. Everything he has done, everything he has sacrificed, he believes he has done for her. And now, in his eyes, she has turned against him. Overcome by anger and hatred, he lashes out, choking the woman he loves and ultimately sealing his transformation into Darth Vader. Though we don't see him don the iconic suit until after his duel with Obi-Wan, Anakin's fall is already complete. His addiction, his lust for power, have pushed his loved ones away, and he has done unspeakable things that he can't take back. The tragedy of Anakin Skywalker is inseparable from the failures of the Jedi Order. They didn't provide him with the guidance and compassion he needed. Instead, their mistrust and rigid dogma created the very monster they feared. Anakin's suffering echoes across the saga. He is a man who moves from slavery under Watto to the emotional rigidity of the Jedi, and finally to the cruel dominion of Palpatine. a master whose chains Anakin accepts because he believes he has lost everything he ever cared about. What is left but to serve? By the time we see him as Vader, Anakin is that emotional void, driven only by hatred, anger, and the cold calculation of pain. Yet even in this darkness there remains a flicker of light. Learning of his son stirs something long buried within him, setting the stage for his eventual redemption. It's because of this story that I find Anakin a deeply compelling, multifaceted character, and one of the most tragic figures in the Star Wars saga. There was no room for me to put the backstory in those films in an organic way. Also, if I had started talking about the backstory, the wills and the midichlorians and all that kind of stuff in Star Wars, people would have gone, "Oh my god," and backed off. It wasn't until Jedi came out that I realized I'd lost the tragedy of Darth Vader. In Star Wars, it's set up as, what is that guy? Is he a monster? Is it a robot? They didn't know what he was, and over the course of 3 films his story dissipated. He was the chosen one of the prophecy, yet the irony was lost that it was the son bringing humanity back to the father. It wasn't clear. I felt the story of Anakin Skywalker had enough pathos, and enough of a story to enrich the prequels. How Anakin became a Jedi, how he learned to use the Force, the dark side of the Force, the light side of the Force, and midichlorians. This is where Obi-Wan came from. This is what their relationship was. How Anakin turned into Darth Vader. While Anakin's fall is central, the prequels are equally a story about the failings of the Jedi Order that make Palpatine's success possible. From the moment Qui-Gon Jinn brings Anakin to the Jedi Council in The Phantom Menace, the Jedi are wary of the boy. They sense his fear, his attachment, and his potential for darkness, and as a result they keep him at arm's length. This wariness persists as Anakin grows older. Despite being a decorated war hero and the Republic's most formidable warrior, the Jedi never fully embrace him. They see his impatience and ambition as dangerous, and instead of guiding him through these emotions, they isolate him further. Yoda's advice to let go of attachment, though well-meaning, demonstrates a critical blind spot. The Jedi cannot see that Anakin's humanity is precisely what sets him apart. Their rigid adherence to doctrine prevents them from truly connecting with him. At the same time, the Jedi's role in the Clone Wars exacerbates their vulnerabilities. The war forces them to act as generals in a galactic conflict, drawing them further away from their spiritual roots. They become soldiers instead of peacekeepers, blinded by their role in a war orchestrated by their greatest enemy. For young Jedi, like Anakin and Ahsoka, war becomes a part of their understanding and experience of what it is to be a Jedi. For them, power and skill with a saber are intrinsic parts of being a good Jedi. For the older members of the Jedi Order, they see the warrior path they have been pushed to by the galactic scale of the Clone Wars is temporary, a necessary extension of their role as keepers of the peace. They don't value power or sword skill beyond its ability to defend. This distinction is part of what drives Anakin's indignation. He thinks he is better because he is powerful, because he's the chosen one. But for the Jedi, this is what makes him less suitable a candidate for the rank of Master. Part of the genius of the prequel trilogy lies in how it shows Palpatine's machinations over decades. From the moment he engineers the invasion of Naboo in The Phantom Menace, Palpatine is in complete control. He uses the conflict to undermine Chancellor Valorum and gain sympathy as a leader who promises order. In Attack of the Clones, his manipulation becomes even more apparent. He orchestrates the Clone Wars, pitting the Republic against the Separatists while controlling both sides. He uses Count Dooku to rally the Separatists, while ensuring the Republic is dependent on the Jedi and the newly created clone army. Clones secretly programmed to obey his command in executing Order 66. He endangers Padme in order to push her and Anakin together, to give Anakin an attractive alternative to the Jedi, and encourage his emotional commitment. Perhaps Palpatine's most insidious move is in how he isolates Anakin. From the beginning, Palpatine positions himself as a trusted mentor, someone who understands Anakin's frustrations with the Jedi. He strokes Anakin's ego, fueling his belief that he deserves more power and that the Jedi are in some way holding him back. In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine capitalizes on Anakin's fears, convincing him that only the dark side can save Padme. Palpatine doesn't just exploit Anakin's emotions, he weaponizes them, turning his love for Padme into the very thing that destroys him. The prequels ultimately present a galaxy in decay, a democracy's final days.
It's like poetry, it's sort of they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.
With every character and institution playing a part in its downfall, and the rise of a tyrannical empire by co-opting the bureaucratic machine from within, a disdain for the law and historical precedents, and the manipulation of public opinion by creating a visible enemy in the Separatists. The Jedi, once noble guardians of peace, are undone by their arrogance and rigidity. The Republic, weakened by corruption and fear, hands power to a dictator in the name of security. And Anakin, a hero meant to bring balance to the Force, becomes the agent of its greatest imbalance. The story of the prequels is, at its heart, a grand tale of ambition, betrayal, and tragic inevitability. By the time Revenge of the Sith ends, the galaxy has fallen into darkness, and the Jedi Order is all but extinct. Importantly, the seeds of redemption remain, however. Through the birth of Luke and Leia, the story moves towards hope. Perhaps even a new hope.
I told people at Lucasfilm that they're going to have to face the reality that I'm making a movie that nobody wants to see. But I want to tell that story. I'm more interested in telling the story than I am in just doing a franchise where you tell the same story over and over again.
The prequels are often remembered for their flaws, but when viewed through the lens of tragedy, they reveal a powerful and poignant narrative. Though it's not always told effectively, I'll grant you that. It's the story of a galaxy and a man losing its way, and the consequences of fear, greed, and hubris. In the end, the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker is the tragedy of the galaxy itself. The Star Wars Jedi series joins a storied tradition of video games that have expanded the galaxy far, far away. Classics like Knights of the Old Republic and Jedi Academy set a high bar for storytelling and gameplay respectively, and the Jedi games are clearly influenced by their predecessors. However, they also distinguish themselves in notable ways. I'll add a quick warning here for the following games. I know that they're old, but you never know. Use the chapter select to move ahead if you don't want to hear story spoilers. For many fans, KOTOR remains the gold standard for Star Wars storytelling in the video game format. Released in 2003, it captured the essence of the galaxy far, far away, while offering players something unprecedented at the time: the ability to shape their own Star Wars adventure. Despite its aging gameplay systems, KOTOR's narrative, characters, and moral dilemmas still resonate, and for good reason. The heart of KOTOR's legacy lies in that storytelling prowess, and the player agency it grants. BioWare's writing team delivered a narrative that felt epic, personal, and quintessentially Star Wars. Perhaps one of the greatest plot twists in gaming history, the revelation that you, the player, are actually Darth Revan, a fallen Jedi turned Sith Lord, remains iconic. It's a masterstroke of storytelling that ties the player's journey to the broader Star Wars themes of redemption, identity, and the eternal struggle between light and dark. The twist lands not just because it's shocking, but because the player's choice, embracing the light or succumbing to darkness, feel deeply tied to Revan's legacy. The sequel, Knights of the Old Republic 2, released the following year in 2004, took a bold step in exploring the moral and philosophical complexities of the Star Wars universe. With Obsidian now at the helm, the game questioned the Jedi and Sith dichotomy, examining the cost of war, the nature of the Force, and the limits of good intentions. Where KOTOR celebrates Joseph Campbell's hero's story, the basis of Lucas's own work, KOTOR 2 subverts it. Kreia, the enigmatic mentor figure, challenges the player's assumptions about the Force and morality, asking hard questions about whether the Jedi and the Sith are two sides of the same flawed coin. While the game's rush development left some plot threads unresolved, its ambition and depth shine through, even today. It's a darker, more introspective tale that explores the toll of heroism and the nature of power in a way that feels timeless. The moral alignment system of both games, which tracks your choices and influences the game's world and characters, is of course a standout feature. Unlike many modern games where morality systems can feel binary or inconsequential, KOTOR gives weight to your decisions. Companions like Bastilla, Karth, and HK-47 react to your actions, deepening the immersion and making you feel like a true participant in the galaxy's fate. While KOTOR 2 delves into the philosophical grey areas of the Force, the first game embraces the more traditional Star Wars tone. It's a grand adventure filled with heroes, villains, and a struggle for balance. It channels the spirit of the original trilogy, while offering a fresh take on the lore of the Old Republic era. This is something I feel is missing from Disney's direction for both the sequel trilogy and the scattershot content they've produced for Disney+. Let's please try and get away from Skywalkers. That's all I'm saying. However, as much as KOTOR is revered, its gameplay systems haven't aged well. The D20 system, adapted from tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons, governs KOTOR's combat system. Sure, while it's faithful to its tabletop roots, it's not particularly well suited for translating the cinematic flair of Star Wars combat. Invisible dice rolls feel detached from the visceral back and forth of lightsaber duels or blaster fights, and the mechanics feel slow and repetitive. The level design in KOTOR, while groundbreaking in its time, has aged pretty poorly too. Many environments feel like endless corridors populated by repetitive encounters, with little variation to break up the monotony. Planets such as Taris and Manaan are visually distinct, but their gameplay often fails to leave a lasting impression. Although, I do like Manaan's investigation-heavy story. Combat-heavy segments in particular can drag on, making progression through these areas feel more like a chore than an adventure. The fight through the palace and Onderon is a particular lowlight in this regard, and the less said about the repetitiveness of Malachor 5, the better. One of the most glaring issues is the excessive amount of empty space in many of the maps. Areas that should feel alive and thriving instead feel abandoned, with vast stretches of terrain or hallways offering little in terms of meaningful interaction or engagement. This emptiness detracts from the sense of immersion and highlights that open worlds, when poorly executed, can sometimes be just too open. Instead of enhancing the narrative or gameplay, these barren spaces make the galaxy feel hollow, undercutting the grandeur and mystery that should define the Star Wars universe. For players unfamiliar with tabletop RPG systems, KOTOR's mechanics will feel pretty obtuse. Concepts like saving throws, attack rolls, and feat trees aren't explained very intuitively, creating a barrier for newcomers. It's a hard game to recommend in 2024, despite the excellence of the storytelling. So I have my fingers crossed we eventually see that remake, to reinvigorate a much-loved game. Before Cal Kestis, Cal Katarn's adventures in Dark Forces, Jedi Knight and Jedi Academy set the standard for lightsaber combat in video games. While the narrative might not hit the same emotional highs of KOTOR, these games were groundbreaking for what they offered at the time. The ultimate power fantasy of wielding a lightsaber and tapping into the Force. Cal Katarn's story obviously begins in Dark Forces, a first-person shooter that can be pretty accurately described as Star Wars meets Doom. The game puts you in the boots of Katarn, a former Imperial-turned mercenary who steals the Death Star plans in the original canon. While it didn't have force powers or lightsabers yet, Dark Forces was all about capturing the Star Wars vibe, blaster fights, stormtroopers, and iconic locations like Nar Shaddaa. But where Dark Forces shines isn't necessarily in its story, it's in laying the groundwork for what would come next, a Jedi origin story. Here's where Cal Kestis leveled up. Jedi Knight introduced lightsabers and force powers, and suddenly you weren't just blasting stormtroopers, you were slicing them apart and force pushing them off ledges. This was one of the first games that really made you feel like a force user, long before Fallen Order came along. The story picks up with Cal discovering his Jedi heritage as he hunts down Jarek, a dark Jedi searching for the fabled Valley of the Jedi. While the plot is a bit dated, the game gave players something revolutionary: moral choices. You could lean toward the light side or give in to the dark, with your choices affecting the ending. For its time, this was a pretty big deal. It let players decide whether Kestis would embrace his Jedi destiny or become a Sith in all but name. And the lightsaber combat? Well, it was pretty groundbreaking for the time. It's clunky by today's standards, but Jedi Knight was one of the first games to attempt dynamic saber duels, and it set the stage for what would come next. This is where Cal Kestis truly became a Jedi icon. Outcast is often remembered as the definitive Catan game, a classic that refined everything the series was building toward. The story sees Kyle grappling with his powers and walking away from the Force, only to be pulled back into the fold to stop a dark Jedi, Dasan, from creating a new Sith army. The narrative never reaches KOTOR levels of depth, but it's a classic Star Wars adventure nonetheless. A rogue hero with a complicated past, forced to step up and become a Jedi again, but the real star of the show is the gameplay. The lightsaber combat in Jedi Outcast was revolutionary for its time. You could switch between combat styles, fast, balanced, and heavy, and duels felt fluid, skillful, and cinematic. Add-ins force powers like choking enemies and throwing your saber, and you had the ultimate power fantasy. To this day, fans remember Jedi Outcast for its epic lightsaber battles, which still hold up surprisingly well. Kyle took a bit of a back seat in Jedi Academy, which put you in the boots of a player-created character, a new recruit at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy. While Kestis served as your mentor, this game expanded on everything that made Jedi Outcast great. The combat was refined even further, and for the first time you could build your own lightsaber. Single blade, dual blades, or this double-bladed saber made famous by Darth Maul. The customization options and choice of force powers made Jedi Academy incredibly replayable, and the game even brought back the light and dark side morality system. Whether you became a noble Jedi Knight or fell to the dark side was entirely up to you. The narrative was simpler, more of a series of episodic missions rather than a tightly woven story, but it gave players something even more important: freedom. You could explore planets, tackle missions in any order, and decide your own fate. Cal Kestis and his adventures in the Dark Forces and Jedi Knight series represent a key chapter in Star Wars gaming history. The games might not have the deep role-playing systems of KOTOR or the polished cinematic flair of Fallen Order, but they captured something just as important: the thrill of being a Jedi. From mastering lightsaber combat to making moral choices that determined your path, these games gave fans the ultimate Star Wars power fantasy. While the series hasn't aged perfectly, the combat can feel clunky, and the level design leans heavily on repetitive corridors, its influence is undeniable. Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy laid the groundwork for modern Jedi games, and their lightsaber combat systems are still some of the best in the genre. In some respects, the Jedi series can be seen as the spiritual successor to these classics, a blend of KOTOR's narrative ambition and Jedi Academy's dynamic gameplay. Let's talk about The Force Unleashed for a moment. A game that, in many ways, feels like the direct spiritual predecessor to Fallen Order. It's a fascinating snapshot at Star Wars gaming history because it tries to do what Fallen Order later perfected: to marry cinematic storytelling with intense, engaging combat. While Fallen Order takes a grounded, methodical approach, The Force Unleashed is pure, over-the-top chaos. The Force Unleashed puts you in the boots of Starkiller, Darth Vader's secret apprentice, and the premise is as wild as it sounds. Starkiller's journey is one of betrayal, redemption, and the creation of the Rebel Alliance, making it one of the boldest narrative moves in Star Wars gaming history. The story aims big, weaving Starkiller's personal struggle with the larger galactic conflict. It doesn't have the depth of narrative as KOTOR, or the emotional nuance of Fallen Order, but it has a certain flair. The cinematic presentation was a huge selling point, with big moments like pulling a Star Destroyer out of the sky, or Starkiller's final showdown with Vader. Where it stumbles is character depth. Starkiller is a powerhouse, but his arc can feel rushed and his relationships a bit underdeveloped. Compare his journey to Cal in Fallen Order, whose journey feels more personal and introspective, exploring themes of loss, trauma, and redemption in a more grounded way. Combat is where the games truly diverge. The Force Unleashed was a product of its time, drawing heavy inspiration from the hack-and-slash action games of the mid-2000s, like God of War and Devil May Cry. The combat is bombastic and unrestrained, with Starkiller wielding the Force like a wrecking ball. You're throwing stormtroopers into orbit, unleashing Force lightning that fries entire rooms, and performing lightsaber combos that send enemies flying. And while it's undeniably fun, it's also pretty silly, sometimes too much so in my opinion. Starkiller's powers are so exaggerated that, for me, it breaks the immersion of the universe, especially when you're throwing around TIE fighters like they're paper planes. It's a power fantasy, sure, but it sacrifices the precision and skill of lightsaber dueling for sheer spectacle. Contrast this with Fallen Order and Survivor. These games clearly took notes from Dark Souls and other methodical action titles, opting for weighty, deliberate combat. Every swing of Cal's saber feels meaningful, every parry and dodge critical. It's less about overwhelming your enemies with sheer power, and more about mastering the abilities you do have. I guess that's what's fascinating about both games, how they reflect the trends of their time. The Force Unleashed came out in 2008, an era dominated by big, flashy action games, and it embraces that excess, giving players a game that felt larger than life. In the hands of Starkiller, the Force wasn't a mystical energy, it was a weapon of mass destruction. Fast forward to Fallen Order in 2019, and you see a different industry landscape. Games like Dark Souls and Sekiro had redefined action combat, emphasizing challenge, precision, and grounded mechanics. Fallen Order adapted this style, delivering a more thoughtful, skill-based take on lightsaber combat, while maintaining the cinematic flair that defines Star Wars. The Force Unleashed might not have aged as gracefully as Fallen Order, but it still holds a special place in Star Wars gaming history. It captured the raw, unchecked power of the Force in a way that no other game has, even if it leaned too far into absurdity at times for me. The story, while ambitious, doesn't have the same emotional depth as Fallen Order, but it did pave the way for the cinematic storytelling we see in modern Star Wars games. If The Force Unleashed is a wild, over-the-top power fantasy, Fallen Order is its more refined, more mature sibling. Both games aim to deliver the ultimate Star Wars experience, but they approach it in very radically different ways, one with reckless abandon, the other with grounded precision. The Jedi series is both a love letter to Star Wars and a bold step forward for the franchise in the video game format. By blending those classic themes of redemption and choice with modern storytelling sensibilities, it offers a fresh perspective on the Jedi and their place in the galaxy. While it may not reach the narrative depth of KOTOR or the gameplay freedom of Jedi Academy, it carves out its own niche as a cinematic, emotionally resonant journey. Ultimately, all of these games remind us why Star Wars endures. It's not just about lightsabers and space battles, it's about hope, resilience, and the enduring struggle to do what's right, even in the face of darkness. In that sense, Cal Kestis' story is a worthy addition to the saga, and the Jedi series stands tall as a defining chapter in the legacy of Star Wars games. As we look to the future of the Star Wars Jedi series, it's clear that Respawn Entertainment has laid a pretty strong foundation. With its compelling personal storytelling, exhilarating gameplay, and masterful recreation of the Star Wars aesthetic, the series has carved out a unique place in the galaxy far, far away. However, as with everything, there's a couple areas I'd like to see some more growth to round out the trilogy. One of the standout achievements of the Jedi series is its focus on Cal Kestis as a protagonist. His story feels deeply personal in a franchise often dominated by epic, galaxy-spanning conflicts. I'd like to see a third game take this a step further, delving even deeper into Cal's psyche and exploring the long-term effects of his experiences. How does a Jedi navigate the line between light and dark after years of struggle, particularly now, anchorless, without a master to lean on for guidance and an emotional grounding? What does survival mean for a Ronin when the Empire's shadow remains unyielding? These questions could guide a more introspective narrative that maintains the series' emotional core. The temptation with all sequels is to go bigger, but in this series, it is so often those quiet moments of reflection, that resonate the most. And with the inclusion of Kata to the crew of the Mantis, perhaps Cal can now honour the storytelling of things like The Last of Us or The Mandalorian, and give us a new emotional bond, with Cal now in the position of master. The lightsaber combat in Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor has been a highlight of both games, blending cinematic style with methodical, skill-based gameplay. The addition of multiple stances in Survivor, ranging from the agile single blade to the powerful crossguard, brought a welcome depth to the combat. But I'd like to see them go a little deeper for a third game, taking inspiration from maybe Ghost of Tsushima's rock-paper-scissors style of sword stances. Let me explain how I see us tying narrative and combat mechanics with Star Wars lore and improve the already good systems further. Imagine a system where each stance is more than a weapon option. It's a philosophy tied to the teachings of legendary Jedi Masters. Like in Ghost of Tsushima, each stance would be able to dynamically switch during combat, with each having strengths and weaknesses against different types of melee units. This could ideally be woven into the story, with Cal Kestis discovering holocrons containing knowledge of saber techniques. It may be too fanservice-y for some, but I'd like to see the series subtly pull from the wider universe as a natural extension of what we already know. Each holocron could focus on a distinct lightsaber form, taught by a master who excelled in its use. Ataru. Taught by Yoda, this stance emphasizes acrobatic, high-energy movement and rapid strikes, ideal for overwhelming groups of lightly armored enemies. Gemso, passed down from Anakin Skywalker, is a heavy, counter-focus style that uses brute strength and powerful swings, perfect for breaking through shields or facing large, single enemies. Surisu, Obi-Wan Kenobi's signature form, focused on defense and patience, excelling against ranged attackers or relentless waves of enemies. Ideally, it would reward players who time blocks and parries precisely. Makashi, a precise duelist stance modeled after Count Dooku's technique, would be suited for one-on-one encounters with agile opponents or other lightsaber wielders. And perhaps we could even add Juyo, a ferocious, unpredictable style, similar to Darth Maul's approach, which could be unlocked later in the game as Cal confronts his darker impulses. Think high risk, high reward, devastatingly powerful, but leaves the player vulnerable to the dark side. To give each stance meaningful weight, I'd like to see a rock, paper, scissors approach to combat design implemented, similar to the one we can see in Ghost of Tsushima. Different enemy types would require the player to adapt stances strategically, with each form having strengths and weaknesses against specific opponents. This dynamic would hopefully force players to think tactically, switching stances mid-combat to adapt to threats in the moment-to-moment gameplay. Mastering when and how to transition between forms would add some depth and a dynamic puzzle-solving feel to the combat. One of my frustrations with Survivor's additional saber styles was that only 2 could be equipped at any one time. It doesn't make a lot of sense narratively that Cal can't pull out his blaster. The limitation feels arbitrary, and leaves the combat feeling less immersive than it should. If I see a far-off enemy, just let me pull out the blaster holstered on my hip. Don't make me run back to the nearest meditation point to equip something I already visually have on hand. It's a weird choice that I can't get behind. Either embrace the player having options or don't include them in the first place. Making a change to a rock-paper-scissors system should allow an embracing of all available options and making on-the-fly decisions about what is needed and when. Now, I know that these mechanics may not necessarily be favoured by all, as it's quite complex, so it could be something available for those who wish to play at the higher levels of difficulty, with the lower levels maybe making it inessential to having to switch, to ensure that the story elements are not overshadowed by the combat. Tying these combat stances to the narrative should add emotional resonance and a sense of discovery that's been missing since Fallen Order. Cal could embark on quests to locate ancient holocrons, each containing a trial or memory fragment from a legendary Jedi Master. These trials could serve as both gameplay tutorials and lore-rich story moments, exploring those themes of legacy, balance, and the weight of wielding such power, bringing back that tight interweaving of narrative and gameplay that Fallen Order did so well. For example, Cal might grapple with the teachings of Juyo, questioning whether to embrace such a dangerous form, given its ties to the dark side. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here. While Cal's journey has been compelling, the series has also struggled at times to fully develop its supporting cast and villains. Bode, Akuna, Dagan Gera, and even members of the Mantis Crew have suffered from underwritten arcs that failed to reach their full potential. I hope that a third game will give its characters room to breathe, ensuring that their relationships with Cal feel earned and impactful. A more balanced focus on both protagonist and ensemble could elevate the emotional stakes and make the story's climactic moments truly resonate in a way that I felt they didn't in Survivor. The move toward larger, more open maps in Survivor was certainly ambitious, but it diluted the tight, purposeful design that made Fallen Order's exploration so engaging for me. A third game could, hopefully, strike a better balance, offering some of the freedom of open-world design while maintaining that strong sense of direction and discovery that defined the series' first entry. Expansive hubs like Kobo could be enhanced with more dynamic elements, such as evolving narratives or player-driven changes to the environment. But personally, I'd like to see the sequel elevate its Metroidvania design by embracing dynamic, evolving environments that make backtracking not only engaging, but narratively impactful. One of the greatest strengths of the Metroidvania genre is the satisfaction of revisiting familiar locations armed with new powers, unlocking hidden areas, and forging new paths. However, this mechanic loses its luster if the world remains static. To keep exploration fresh, a potential sequel could take cues from games like Metroid Dread and Sekiro, where revisiting areas feels revitalized by environmental changes and narrative-driven evolution. Imagine returning to a planet you thought you knew, only to find it transformed. Perhaps an Empire-controlled industrial site has been abandoned in the wake of Cal's liberation efforts, now reclaimed by scavengers and overtaken by encroaching vegetation. Alternatively, the Empire's grip might tighten further, turning the area into a fortress crawling with new patrols and defensive structures. These sorts of changes shouldn't just be cosmetic. They should reflect Cal's impact on the galaxy, grounding the game's storytelling in its level design. Each revisit to a planet should feel like a fresh experience, with the environment evolving alongside the narrative. Frustratingly, Survivor does start to experiment with this approach in fits and starts. The crashed wreckage of the Luca Hulk on Kobo blocks off certain corridors on a repeated visit after the events of the story, when it's taken over by bounty hunters. But it's not pushed anywhere particularly interesting, and makes areas inaccessible, which I'm not sure was intentional or not. I'd like to see more experimented with enemy encounters over the course of the runtime too. Returning to a once familiar area might mean facing stormtroopers equipped with new technology, designed to counter Cal's powers, or elite squads deployed to hunt him down. These changes should challenge players to use their newly acquired skills creatively, keeping the gameplay dynamic and reinforcing the sense of an escalating conflict. Maybe using more Force powers attracts the attention of more Force-resistant foes, like the Purge Troopers. The environment itself could play an active role in making the return to already visited areas more exciting. Natural disasters or shifting terrain could reshape a planet's landscape. A canyon once traversed with grappling hooks might now be flooded, requiring players to use underwater traversal upgrades. A sandstorm could obscure paths, or volcanic activity might create dangerous new hazards. When Survivor was announced, I was hoping that an open world design approach would allow more of these dynamic, emergent moments. But the game doesn't really attempt anything particularly interesting with its world and environments. These changes wouldn't just make exploration feel fresh, they'd add layers of challenge and immersion, making the galaxy feel alive and unpredictable. Tying these changes to Cal's journey would add a deeply personal layer to that exploration. Cal's actions could inspire resistance movements, leading to visible signs of rebellion on one planet, while another might fall further under Imperial control as a result of his growing notoriety. These environmental shifts wouldn't just serve as a gameplay feature, they'd help tell the story. Returning to a planet would feel like stepping into a living world, one that reacts to the hero's choices in the larger galactic conflict. One that feels like it continues spinning when you, the player, are not present, rather than always waiting for you to return. Of course, the hallmark of a great Metroidvania is the satisfaction of using new powers to uncover hidden secrets. I hope a third Jedi game will amplify this by designing early areas with those tantalizing hints of inaccessible locations. Hidden chambers, ancient ruins, or lore-filled archives just out of reach. The two Jedi games are pretty good at this, but the range of powers you get at the moment are pretty uncreative. Double jump, grapple hook, wall running. I'd like to see more unique traversal powers and a bit more creativity in its puzzle design to really stand out as a Metroidvania, specifically. By evolving its environments and tying those changes to both the gameplay and the narrative, I hope a third Jedi game could breathe new life into the Metroidvania formula. It's not just about backtracking, it's about seeing the world grow and change in response to Cal's journey, making every return feel fresh and exciting. The Star Wars Jedi series has succeeded so far because it captures what makes Star Wars special. The balance between epic adventure and intimate, character-driven storytelling moments. As Respawn looks ahead to a potential third installment, the challenge will be to honor that legacy while pushing the series into bold new territory. By refining its storytelling, deepening its gameplay systems, and expanding its exploration of the galaxy, the next game could not only conclude Cal Kestis' story in a satisfying way, but also set a new standard for what a Star Wars game can be. Based on these two adventures, I'm confident in Respawn to close the trilogy well. Thanks for watching. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
You belong in Slytherin!